Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. I've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten, presented to you by FanDuel. We appreciate you being here, and we appreciate having Big Jeff, with us tonight. Rest assured, even with all the firings going on in Big Ten football, well, not really in Big Ten football, but in all of college football, you got Mike Norvell being rumored of being fired, Billy Napier at Florida, Jay Norvell got fired today. I Bleav he was at Colorado State. I'm just thankful I'm not fired, Jeff. I'm just, not that I can get fired from my own podcast, but that's what I'm thankful for.
Well, on my Big Jeffs on Thursday nights, I've done 2 on my own. So it is kind of like you fired yourself for my show, JR.
That's true.
I'm excited. This is like getting the band back together. Little Blues Brothers. We're going to get the band back together.
There we go. I like it. Very good. Yes, I appreciate you being here, Jeff. Zach, unable to be with us tonight, but we're going to have a good time. Philip says, ILL, Zach's been fired. Not fired. Not yet. If he keeps missing days, maybe. No, I'm just kidding. No, Zach, I think he's at a conference or something like that, he said. So he'll be back, I Bleav, Tuesday. If not Tuesday, he'll be back on Sunday. So Britton's here. Who. And then he's got the Hoosiers. There we go. That's a chant you know and love there very well, Jeff. Illini Bubba with the I and I, and the Bielema little picture there. I don't see the picture on my end here, unfortunately. StreamYard doesn't do that, but I did enjoy the T picture I did of Bielema. So. All right, well, hey, let's jump straight into this, Jeff. We got a lot to get to here. Everybody, we are going to go through one thing that we learned about every single Big Ten team. Yes, it was still week 8, but I think even halfway through the season, as these teams play and as you see more stuff happen, you can still learn more about these teams. You can learn more about the coaches, the players, and so we're going to go through that. Jeff, the first one that we have to get to here is Ohio State thumping Wisconsin 34-0. Hard to learn a lot from these type of games because honestly this was just kind of like a horror movie for Badgers fans. I apologize, Badger fans, that you had to go through this one. Ohio State fans were obviously very happy with it, but this was a thumping. Ohio State, even when they were only ahead 17-0 at halftime, it still felt like there was just no chance Wisconsin had in this game at all, and that's just kind of the way the game felt the entire time. Ohio State came out throwing a lot in this game, came out with some tempo, and ultimately got stopped in the red zone a couple times, but then they were still able to score, like I said, 34 points in this one. Jeff, what did you learn about the Buckeyes in this game?
So on this one, I think, we've heard the term rat poison before. Nick Saban kind of termed that. And when everyone's telling you how great you are and everything, you can let your guard down. I thought it was amazing, before the game, how fired up the Buckeyes were. If you were watching the broadcast and everything, they're doing Ryan Day was in the middle. He's basically, chest bumping people. And you would think they were playing, a top 15 Badger team like the old days, So I just think that's impressive because that is the challenge for your Indianas and Ohio States and even Oregons of the world, is making sure you don't let your guard down, because if you get into a tight game and it prolongs, you never know what will happen. So that's my impressive thing. And I just want to make one other comment, JR. My brother graduated from Wisconsin. All 3 of his boys, so all 3 of my nephews all went to Wisconsin. I've been to 10, 12 Wisconsin games with them. And I asked, did you watch the game? They all said basically, we watched the first quarter and then we said, we're good. We understand how this is going to, and they all tuned out. So, that's bad news. I know we're not talking Wisconsin here, but we'll talk later. But that's really bad if your fan base is checking out after the first quarter of a game.
Yeah, and I think you could tell from the lack of fan support that was in there as well. There's some stadiums that you can kind of see that from time to time, but Wisconsin, when that starts happening, I mean, that's Camp Randall. That's supposed to be an environment that people are afraid to go and play at, and right now they're not afraid to go and play there because the fan base is not as rabid. They're not making it nearly as difficult of a place as it has been, and it's really, really unfortunate time for Wisconsin. What I had to learn about the Buckeyes in this game, and I know everybody's talking about Mendoza in the chat. Don't worry, we'll get to Mendoza here in the next game we talk about. But I learned that Ohio State Like this is scary for a team like Michigan. Now, I'm not saying Ohio State's going to beat Michigan this year because, like I said, in order to pick it, I have to see it happen again. But last year, I felt like Ohio State did not play the brand of football that they needed to play in order to beat them. To me, they showed something different in this game. This was a very good run defense that Wisconsin has, probably the lone bright spot of their team. And what did Ohio State do? 8 straight passes coming out in this game. They threw the ball over 40 times. At one point in the third quarter, Julian Sayin had more completions than Wisconsin had offensive plays run in the game. Just a pretty amazing thing. It's not like they threw the ball 60 times in this game. They threw it 42 times, and still Julian Sayin was able to just kind of pick apart this secondary, and it was clear that Ryan Day wasn't messing with trying to do the run game, trying to do this, trying to do that. He was just going out there and saying, let's get these guys put away as quickly as possible and try to play as many players as we can. And I thought it was, to me, something that if you're a team that kind of not relies, but kind of benefits, I would say, from Ohio State, maybe getting away from their identity sometimes, it doesn't look like Ohio State's going to do that as much this season. Do you have any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yeah, and the only thing I say is I think Ohio State actually uses their short pass game too as a form of run game because their running game really is not as good. They don't have as good as running backs. Their offensive line is better at pass blocking, but they're using the short passing game as a form of running game in addition to that, JR, I think. And the other, just to throw I'm a stat guy, if those who tune into the Thursday nights one, read a stat, Wisconsin only had 9 plays in Ohio State territory the whole game, and they gained 6 yards in those 9 plays.
Wow. Jeff, this might be a good question for you. Matt's here, and he says, what would an Indiana-Ohio State Big Ten championship game line be like? Would Ohio State be favored by 3.5, maybe 6.5? Ohio State, I think the only common opponent you could work this one off of is Illinois. I Bleav Indiana was a touchdown favorite at home in that one, and Ohio State was, I think, a 16.5 point favorite in that one on the road. You have any idea what the line would be there, Jeff?
Now, it's a tough question because between now and that game, assuming those two make it, the teams will evolve. Mm-hmm. If I were calling it right now, though, it definitely would be Ohio State. It'd be closer to a touchdown, but it wouldn't be past a touchdown. So I'm going to not give a specific.
So saying maybe about 6.5, maybe a little bit lower.
Closer to that, but I don't think it would be a 7.5 because that's a big difference. All right. Mm-hmm. I mean, great question, though. Yeah, and I reserve the right to change that by the time the game changes because both teams are going to evolve.
Oh, yeah, and both teams are showing so much good right now that it's almost like if either of these teams hesitates, like the other one could come up on them. I mean, I think there's no question right now. I know there's some, hype out there for Alabama right now, and I suppose I understand some of that, but to me, there's no question that Ohio State and Indiana are the 2 best teams in college football right now. Until something happens, these are the 2 best teams in college football. They may not be even by game lines or anything like that, but they're the 2 best teams in college football, in my opinion. Jeff, the team that was on the unfortunate side of the horror film on Saturday was Wisconsin. What did you learn about Wisconsin, if you could learn anything about them just getting bludgeoned in this game?
It is tough because I listened to their podcasts. I listened to tons of podcasts, by the way, guys, like all these Big Ten teams. I do think, and they said this on the pod, the defense actually is still playing hard. Their weakness, though, is their secondary. And Ohio State, to your point, Jared, they were taking advantage of it. So it doesn't look all that great because Ohio State put up many yards, but they really kind of hung in there. And when you figure what did Ohio State score, 34, given that the Wisconsin offense didn't do anything. And technically, to hold Ohio State to 34, it might sound weird, but it's semi-impressive of that defense. So I just think, it's a shame that their offense isn't better because I think this would be a solid team if their offense wasn't so terrible. So that would be my takeaways. The defense still is a solid unit. I'm not saying really good. That's what I'd say.
I can't help but think if they just had their starting quarterback, if they just had their starting left tackle, like if they just had they have 2 running backs that are injured right now, like there's just so many injuries and it's not an excuse. You still need to be able to go out there and perform. No Wisconsin fan is gonna feel bad for Luke Fickell because of that. But man, this team is just so injury ridden. It's just kind of been Luke Fickell's entire career at Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I would say that's a real thing, but another real thing is how disappointing the line is. I know they've had injuries, but that even if they had those players, it's still, to Wisconsin standard, this line is really not good. You know what I mean, JR? So, but you could potentially reach a bowl. The problem is their schedule is brutal, even with those players, but certainly they would be better offensively, to your point, JR, without those injuries. Yeah.
Tough stuff. The thing I learned, and this was less on the football field, and it was more kind of just watching Luke Fickell and his post-game press conference, because this was the last thing that I wrote down that I learned, because it was just so difficult to try and pick something from this. I learned that I needed to have more respect for Luke Fickell. I have said multiple times so far this year that he has given up and that his team has given up, and I don't think that was accurate. I think that there was times during the season where it looked like they'd given up, but I think honestly it's just they are that hurt and they are going through that much, and the defense is on the field that much, that it's really difficult to try and find exceptional plays here and there where it looks like they have strength and they have stuff going on. So I learned I need to have more respect for Luke Fickell, mainly because he's not like some of these lame duck SEC coaches who come out with excuses and try to say, oh, well, this, that, and the other. And, you just got to know that college football and these teams are really good, and you just need to accept that there's going to be losses now or anything. Luke Fickell doesn't do that. He gets into his post-game press conference and he says, I'm disappointed again. It's on me. Preparation needs to be better. And he takes accountability for it. He's not throwing jabs at travel or anything like that. And it does mean something to me that Christian Allegro broke his arm in this game. They put a cast on him and he went back out and he played the entire rest of the game. He broke his arm in the first quarter and he goes out there and he plays the entire rest of the game. This is one of the most like emotional conundrums that I have right now this season, is like Wisconsin's not good and it frustrates me, but I also really, really like Luke Fickell and I respect Luke Fickell, and it's difficult to see them. Obviously, if we have Minnesota or Iowa fans in the chat, they're not feeling this way. I get that. But for me, it's difficult right now seeing this Wisconsin team happen to him.
So a couple comments. I agree. I like how he doesn't make excuses. I can tell you, I listened to Todd McShay's podcast. He blistered James Franklin when they went to UCLA, and he said the travel, and then we lost a linebacker, and then after all that, he said, but we still need it. No, you already made the excuses. He thought that was just terrible leadership, and he wasn't surprised to see them collapse. So you're not seeing it. I can tell you, though, what does piss off Wisconsin fans, though, is they got the ball back. They had a minute left in the half, had it reasonable, maybe the 20, 30-yard line, and he just ran up the middle when they were still only down. I can't remember the score, JR. The podcasters were just like, we know bad things can happen if we try to throw because we have an experience. We'd rather see us try and have it be picked off than to say, nope, we're just going to hand it up the middle when you do have a chance to score if everything goes right before the half. So that just is a bad look. Now, I don't think that's Fickell quitting, but he should just be aggressive there. And if bad things happen, it happens. That's just.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel for Fickell right now. Like, he had the Michigan game where he didn't use any of his timeouts at the end of that game. I understood why the fans were upset about that. Like, I do not blame the fans for being upset at all. Just because I respect a coach doesn't mean I don't question them or I don't think that they're making wrong decisions. Right now, Luke Fickell is making a lot of wrong decisions. Right now, Luke Fickell is not, ingratiating himself to the fans very much. I totally get that, and I think that that's accurate. But I also think.
But he's not making excuses. Your point.
Right.
I totally agree.
We can say we respect. Right. We can say we respect him, that he's not going out there and say, oh, guys, it's just new college football. We're going to go 2-10 some seasons. You just got to get used to it. And it's like, no, he's not making excuses. It is what it is. So, Fisherman says, I bet Wisconsin won't fire Fickell until the end of the season. Man, I go on their message boards sometimes, and I saw one of the people say that they might keep him next year. So I don't know what's going to happen with
I don't want to
Fickell.
spend too much time on this. One thing I wonder if they've told him, listen, we are going to let you go, but we're going to let you play out the year. And maybe for both parties, it can make sense or something. I have no basis in thinking that, but it's just kind of weird that something hasn't been done by now. You know what I mean?
Especially with all the like with all the fire-ins and everything that's going on right now, right? Billy
Right.
Napier losing his job, James Franklin, Jay Norvell, like Mike Norvell is probably going to lose his job this week. Deshaun Foster was fired super early. Like just with how many fire-ins there are, if there weren't very many fire-ins, I could kind of understand it. But with how many there are right now, you would think you'd want to be open and in the market if you're gonna, fire him. But I don't know. Maybe they wait till December when the buyout gets lower. Who knows?
Yeah, that's why I'm thinking. Yeah, that would be the reason for saying, "Hey, we're going to let you go, but we'd like you to stay." And anyway,
I've also heard that floated out there too. Fisherman is that they're gonna fire him during the bye week after Oregon. So who knows? I'll believe it when it happens. At this point, we've talked about it enough on here that it's like, we'll see what happens when we get there. We got some more people in here. Philip, Illini, Bubba. Who else? We got Joshua. Appreciate you being here. Joshua says if the offense doesn't improve, they'll go 2-10. I think you're right. I mean, it's tough right now, right? I mean, they basically have. I don't want to disparage him like that, but they do not have a starting caliber quarterback in Hunter Simmons right now. And I commend Hunter Simmons for trying to be in there and trying to do what he's doing, but it's not working, obviously. Appreciate everybody being in here. Billy Tuesday, appreciate you being here. DJ shared the stream there on Twitter. Appreciate you doing that, DJ. If anybody else wants to do that, if it pops up here, I'll thank you for doing that as well. So Jay's here as well. Appreciate you being here. Oh, Jay's here. Appreciate you being here, Jay. UCLA needs to hire Jerry as their head coach before Penn State does. Yeah, we're going to get to UCLA here in a little bit. I have some thoughts on the coaching situation there. So, all right. Let's move on here, Jeff. Oh, I had the things and everything. I didn't even bring it up. Indiana beats Michigan State 38-13. A little bit scarier at the beginning of the game than I think most people were kind of expecting. Michigan State took the lead there at one point at the beginning. I never really felt like Michigan State was going to win, but it was interesting to me that they came out and had some success on offense. I did not think Michigan State would score more than 10 points in this game, and they scored 10 points in the first half. So, commend Michigan State there, but overall, Fernando Mendoza, you're not stopping him, and this terrible secondary for Michigan State is not stopping him either. He looked like one of the most accurate quarterbacks that we've seen in a long time. Julian Sainz getting some comparisons to CJ Stroud with his accuracy. He deserves it. Fernando Mendoza with some of his accuracy, the way he is able to hit these wide receivers in stride. What do they say? Fernand Heisman. What are you guys saying about it? Mind Heisman or something like that. Fernando Mendoza right now is leading the Heisman race. The win over Oregon, I don't know if he holds on to it. You'll have to have some more bigger games, some bigger moments later on in the season. We'll see. But this Indiana team right now, even with Michigan State coming out and playing pretty well there at the beginning of the game, they still put them away. And Michigan State never really stood a chance. What was your thing you learned about Indiana in this game, Jeff?
So I was watching first three quarters. Defense struggled early, but really I wasn't surprised by that. After the emotional game against Oregon, I was expecting them to maybe come out not quite as sharp. And then often what happens too is the other team, if they have a good coaching staff, you have a good game plan to start, have success, but then the other team who's better makes adjustments. And I think that's what happened here. I mean, obviously Brian Haynes is a great D coordinator for Indiana. So I wouldn't be alarmed if you're an Indiana fan with that slow defensive start would be my takeaway.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree, and I think actually there's a positive to take away from this, and it's that Michigan State tried to do what Iowa did in their game, right? They tried to get the passes out quick and kind of utilize Aiden Childs' mobility and stuff like that against Indiana's defense, and I think it did work there a little bit at the beginning, but Indiana, kudos to them. The adjustments were made, and they didn't let Michigan State, after they got 10 points, do anything there until the end of the game when they got that field goal. So to me, that's kind of the thing that I learned, right? Is that you can see a team have success against Indiana one way, but rarely are you going to see that same success happen again the same way, because Kirk Cinetti and his staff are just too good. The players on this team are too coachable, and I think that gets overlooked a lot with this team. It's just how good these coaches are and how coachable these players are. They're not 5-stars. They have, 7 4-stars on the team, but they are all dudes that have proven themselves in college football. They've proven that they're coachable. They're proven that they can go out there, play well, play within their system, and play together as a team, and that's going to get you really, really far in college football. Jeff, what was your thing you learned about Michigan State in this one?
So just their defense does not allow them to win football games. They're second worst in total defense. That means total yards given up per game. Rutgers is only worse than them. And then they're worse in scoring defense in the Big Ten, 32.7 points per game. And in 4 Big Ten games, JR, listen to this, points they've yielded in 4 games: 45, 38, 38, 38. I mean, you have to score basically 40 points for them to win a Big Ten game. That's just, they're going to lose most of those games. Not surprisingly, they're 0-4. They're giving up 40 a game. So, it's all the defense. Aiden Childs, the offense hasn't been great and everything, but just yielding way too many points consistently. And unless that changes, they're going to win very few games the rest of the year.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. Kurt said defensive struggles 1 TD. I was referring to it more as because of how much success Michigan State had overall. Yeah. You look at their first 2 drives.
They were up 10-7 early.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, it was one TD, but like we were saying, it's just for the beginning of the game. We're not saying there was defensive struggles all game, obviously. But 13 plays, 55 yards in the very first try to get a field goal, and then 12 plays, 75 yards there to get a touchdown later on. Obviously, it didn't last for the entire game, but that's what we meant by that, Kurt. Wanted to make sure we clarify that for you, because we're not saying they struggled the entire game. They let up 13 points. But yeah, the thing I learned about Michigan State in this one is that Aiden Childs is clearly the QB of this team, and he showed why stats are not always a great indicator of how good a player is, in my opinion. Sometimes you can look at stats and say, oh, okay, this player is really good, or oh, this player is not very good. And yes, stats do tell the story well with a player's production. But Aiden Childs has struggled this year largely because of the offensive line. Has he been in his head a little bit? Has he had a lot of pressure on him? Heck yeah, he has. When you have pressure coming at you every single snap, Michigan State has a bottom 5 offensive line in the Big Ten this season, not just in pass pro, but in run blocking as well. When you don't have a run game, when you don't have pass protection, I get that the backup, what was his name, Mesevich or something. I get that he came in and he had some good throws, but overall, when backups come in, it does change things a little bit, and the defense has to adjust. So it's not uncommon for them to come in and have some success early, but we saw him come in later on and he didn't look as good. It's because Aiden Childs, it really is a very, very good talent, and right now he just doesn't have the offensive line. He has the players around him. You saw it in this one. Nick Marsh and some of these guys, they were able to get the ball in their hands, but he doesn't have a run game. He doesn't have consistent offensive line play. It's just... It's very frustrating as a Michigan State fan, and I think that they should be more concerned with wasting Aiden Childs' talent than trying to bench Aiden Childs, in my opinion. That's just me.
Yeah, I don't think they should bench him at all. I definitely agree with that, JR. And he's evolving, all the turnover problems he had. That was mainly a first half of the last year problem. He's had a few issues in a few games, but it's been much more clean this year as far as the turnovers, and that's what you expect to see from a quarterback. Yeah, hard to evaluate I'll talk later on something. When you have a bad offensive line, you can't do much offensively. That's like Wisconsin. We talked about that earlier, right? Mm-hmm. It's a poor offensive line. Even if you had really good other players, you're not going to do that much with a bad line.
Yeah, it's really hard to win, especially in the Big Ten with a bad offensive line. So, all right, anything else on that one before we move on, Jeff?
No, that's good.
All right, let's get to Purdue at Northwestern. I think that this was the most underrated, impressive performance to me of the weekend, right? Nobody's paying attention to Purdue at Northwestern. I get it. There's a bunch of other games going on, but I watched this Purdue Northwestern game, and in fact, I actually rewatched it again today. I know I'm a sicko, okay? Sue me, but I rewatched this game again today. Northwestern's defense is just they are a really good defense. They play sound football. It's really unfortunate that their offense kind of can't catch up to speed with them. More on their offense a little bit later on, I'm sure, but overall, like, this was a good performance by Northwestern in this one. Yes, you probably saw the screenshots of the play-by-play where it was like interception, fumble, interception, turnover on down, stuff like that at the end of the game, and that was funny. But overall, this was impressive for where we thought Northwestern was early on in the season. This was a team that we thought early on in the season they were going to be a bottom 2, bottom 3 team in the Big Ten. Right now, Northwestern sits at 5-2, and maybe they don't have the most impressive win out there, but they have played impressive football against Penn State. They did a good job against UCLA, holding them off in the second half, and this was an impressive performance by the defense. Listen, this Purdue team has a good offense, and that's what I learned, is that this Northwestern team can, in fact, I'm not going to say probably, this Northwestern team can get to 8 wins this season. And if they do, it's going to be because of the defense. I'm not predicting that they will, but if they do, it's going to be because of this defense. Jeff, what did you learn about Northwestern in this game?
Yeah, it's going to be kind of follow up exactly what you're saying, JR. I mean, this is a team that finds ways to win. And really, historically, Northwestern's done a good job of that with not as much talent as some of the teams they're beating. But it's all behind a salty defense I put in there. So, to put what you're saying, Jared, 5th in the Big Ten in total defense, only giving up 305 yards per game total. And then S&P Plus, ESPN's SP Plus, they break out defense. They're ranked 33rd in SP Plus defense, 33rd, JR. That's almost a top 25 unit. And they've played some good teams. Oregon, they only gave up 373 yards to Oregon. Now, only 3, but Oregon, we saw what they did to Rutgers, put up 750, which is pretty insane, actually. but UCLA 311 yards, Penn State 274, Purdue 305, and Purdue's a good offense, and to shut them out. So really, that salty defense, super impressive. It gives you a chance to upset another team, and as long as your offense is being semi-productive and not turning the ball over, you have a chance to beat people you're not supposed to. So that's my thoughts on the Cats.
Well, yeah, and I agree. I should have been more impressed with this team when they played against Oregon than what they were, right? They played at Northwestern, and they only allowed 34 points for Oregon in this one, and they didn't have a rusher of over 100 yards in this game. Dante Moore didn't even throw for 200 or more yards in that game against Northwestern. So I do think it's important to recognize that, and I'll be honest, I've been sleeping on Northwestern. I thought good about them going into the season. Me and Zach kind of talked about they could get to 7, 8, maybe even 9 wins at some point this season. We weren't picking it to happen, but it could happen. And a big reason was because of this defensive line that Northwestern has, which is much better than I think some people are giving them credit for. So yeah, Philip, I think Northwestern's going to go bowling. They only need one more win, right? And you look on that schedule.
It does get tougher. The schedule does get tougher, but I agree, JR. They should be able to get at least one win from it.
Yeah. They have at Nebraska, at USC, Michigan, Minnesota, and Illinois. Those are all good teams. Don't get me wrong, but
they're good enough
to say they couldn't win one of those 5 is inaccurate, in my opinion.
Right.
So
I agree.
And I think, honestly, you have a good opportunity there against maybe Nebraska. I would like it better if it was at home, but Nebraska just had a terrible game, and you have a really good defensive line going against an offensive line that can't block anybody right now. More on Nebraska here in a second, but we'll see what happens. So Billy Tuesday says Braun was a good hire. He was. I just wish he would get rid of Zach Lujan. Because I am not a fan of Zach Lujan and his offense personally. But that's a conversation for another day. With Northwestern won, so we're gonna talk good about them. Jeff, the team that did not win was Purdue, who Ryan Brown went out in this game. Malachi Singleton came in, was okay, but definitely no Ryan Brown, and Purdue got shut out in this one. What did you learn about Purdue, Jeff?
So they're a mistake-prone team that is not talented enough to overcome that. So, and it's the same in this game. 8 penalties for 85 yards, 2 fumbles. They were -1 in the turnover battle. Last week, they were -3. For the year, Jared, they're minus 11. They're last in the Big Ten in turnover ratio, minus 11. So you're just not going to win games like that. And in fact, this is the 13th straight Big Ten loss for Purdue. Now, I say all that. I think Purdue's on the right track, though. They've been very competitive in their game, so I don't want to paint this as like super negative, other than you can't turn the ball over like they are and win. But you can see the future looks pretty good. Being competitive, that's what you want to be in the first year of a coach. And he hasn't had a chance to really bring in enough of his own players. So, want to finish that on a positive note, I guess, for Purdue there, JR.
Yeah, I think – go ahead, sorry.
No, just as hard as I want to admit that, because I'm an Indiana grad, so I hate to admit anything good about Purdue, but
you didn't give it up at all until they're at the end, Jeff. So, great job.
Hopefully everyone knows that.
Yeah. No, I hear you, and I do think that you're right. Like the whole idea of them making mistakes. They had, I believe, 8 penalties in this game. I think they would have had more, but they weren't all accepted. So I think 11 penalties overall, but the 3 of them weren't accepted. And then the turnover issues as well. That was my main thing going into the game, was the turnovers. If Northwestern could continue to not have turnovers, Northwestern did turn the ball over in this one, but Purdue turned it over more in this one. So to me, the issues are rising for this team with the penalties and the turnovers a little bit more kind of as the season goes on. It's not totally uncommon for that to happen. So I do think that's something that needs to get fixed. But Purdue, I don't know if they have a shot anymore to win a Big Ten game this season. I thought they would, based on this offense and some of Ryan Brown's playmaking, with Ryan going down, not playing the rest of this game. I don't think Purdue is going to win a Big Ten game this season. Purdue fans are going to be frustrated, but I'm with you. I think Barry Odom has this team in at least the right direction right now. It's just so hard because everybody's going to compare their team and their new coach to Kirk Cinetti, right? Oh, Kirk Cinetti came to Indiana and he got him to the playoffs the first year. There's a lot more happening there than just they hired Kirk Cinetti. Kirk Cinetti is a great coach, don't get me wrong, but he had a lot of support from the administration and stuff like that, which that's all the credit to Indiana. I'm giving more credit here to Indiana than I am anything else. So really good stuff there. I say that to say people should not compare their first year head coach to Kirk Cinetti. Kirk Cinetti is not something that people can just do. It's far too difficult, and honestly it's one of the reasons why he's the 3rd highest paid coach in all of college football right now, because coaches don't do what Kirk Cinetti did. So
agreed on that. I do think, Jared, their best chance to win though is this week. Is it this week versus Rutgers?
Yes, this week.
And Rutgers is not a confident team right now, so this would be the one to get.
Well, and you see these teams play up against like an Oregon or an Ohio State. You saw with Minnesota, right? Minnesota played Ohio State. The very next week they played Purdue. Purdue almost won that game. Minnesota came back in the 4th quarter and was able to get it. So good on them. But it would not be uncommon for Purdue to go up against this Rutgers team after facing Oregon, and for Rutgers to have a bit of a clunker. So I agree with you. This is their best opportunity to finish out the year. So, all right. Hey, do want to remind you all to like and subscribe. We appreciate if you're doing that. If you are on a podcast, give us a 5-star rating and review. We're going to have a second segment of the podcast here later on, but tell a friend, let them know about the Big Ten Huddle. We always appreciate when we get new viewers and other people, and we've got a lot of new viewers lately. The thing that I find really funny, and I'm not trying to disparage these people because they are new and they don't realize it, but sometimes we get new viewers and they're like, are you ever going to give this team credit? And I always respond and say, yes, when they win, we do. That's one of the staples of this podcast, is that we do not refuse to give teams credit. You win, you do something exceptional, we will definitely give you credit. And right now you can see that as evidence with Northwestern. Other teams, we appreciate you being here. Oh, look at that. Philip helping us out. 8 likes and 48 watching. If you're watching, get us up there. 11 likes. We appreciate that, Philip. Thanks for watching out for us there. And we appreciate everybody who does like the video. All right, Jeff, next one, we have Michigan beats Washington, and this was not a game where Michigan dominated the entire game. It kind of felt like they dominated the entire game, but it wasn't necessarily dominated on the scoreboard the entire time. Injury-riddled game. Justice Haynes didn't play in this one. The left tackle, Evan Link, went out for Michigan in this one. Washington had some guys come back, but their offensive line was banged up with Carver Willis and John Mills, both not playing, and those are 2 of their best offensive linemen so far this season. So it was a rough outing for Washington in this one. they just kind of kept making mistake after mistake after mistake. Damon Williams, after having 400 passing yards and over 100 rushing yards against Rutgers, comes out in this one, throws 3 interceptions, has negative rushing yards because of the sacks on the day. It was just not a good performance by Washington at all. But we'll start with Michigan. What did you learn about Michigan in this game?
So I just think, as expected, a young quarterback and a pretty young team, let's face it, given what they've lost the last year or two, they're just going to play much better at home than on the road. And so to me, this is what was expected. And one of my big Jeff's picks, I had Michigan winning this game, even though I think Washington probably is the better team. I just like the circumstance here for Michigan. So, and also to stay positive, Michigan, I predicted with a young quarterback, as the year went along, they would get better and better. I do think that's happening, but you're still seeing this inconsistency of games. That needs to smooth out more, because last week against USC, that was a clunker. They didn't just lose. They got dominated. That's not what you want to see. There's no shame in losing that USC team. I think that's a really good USC team. So, but I think Michigan's on track, right? And I think Michigan fans should feel much better. The issue is, I listen to Michigan podcasts and they've been on a roller coaster ride where feeling better, then, oh, the sky's falling, and the fan base is kind of all like in a battle on Sharon Moore. Like, should we, has he had enough time for us to really be too critical of him? And some are like, wait a minute, we're a blue blood. We should be good, right? Faster than this. And it's kind of interesting to hear Michigan fans. But I guess my key thing, this is what to expect. You're seeing the team improve, and the quarterback is reflecting that. He's up and down as young quarterback, but he's improving. So it's positive for Michigan, I think, for the future.
It is positive, and I was hesitant to even bring this up, but you mention it does feel like I need to bring it up at this point. I do think that we have a bit of revisionist history based on Michigan, and I know, oh, you got an Ohio State hat there in the background. You're biased. I get it. Come at me, Michigan fans. I understand. But this Michigan's kind of going back to what they were before the 3-year run when they won the national championship, right? I mean, they were a team that won 11, 10, 9 games every year, sometimes 8 games under Jim Harbaugh. I don't remember if he had an 8-game season in there or not, but 2020 was definitely his worst year, but that, could have been attributed to COVID and other things, so kind of throw that one out a little bit. But overall, like, even Jim Harbaugh, a great head coach that they had there, obviously losing to Ohio State as much as he did before that 3-year run is not something that Michigan is known for in all of their history. In fact, they lead the series against Ohio State. But at least since like the 2000s, that's kind of what you've come to know from Michigan a little bit. A team that can get up there, they can be a top contender some years, and then some years they come a little bit down and they have an 8-9 win season. I don't think Sharon Moore is Brady Hoke. I do think that Sharon Moore is able to run things a little bit better and have some more charisma that, as a young head coach. So I don't think he's him, but he's definitely not Jim Harbaugh in this situation. And the thing that I learned about Michigan was, despite multiple injuries and maybe some suspension as well, I don't know if you have any thoughts on what was going on there. I don't know if any of your podcasts mentioned that, Jeff, but Rod Moore not playing after his tweet this week, and Brandon Hillman not playing as well. Like, maybe some suspensions. They still came out. They played very good football. They played good team football. And even with Evan Link going out in this one, they were still able to dominate the lines of scrimmage. Yes, Washington is a bad team on the road. I understand that, but it was still much needed for the Michigan fan base and the Michigan players.
I mean, you bring up a good point. My comments on their round track and everything, probably that's more from an offensive perspective. When you have a freshman starter, and I don't care how talented that freshman is, you're just going to have your struggles. But to your point, JR, the defense just not being nearly good has made this a definitely not up to what Michigan saw in that 3-year stretch type of Michigan team. And that is worrisome. A lot of people think Martindale's just not cutting it too. I can tell you that so they're questioning their defensive coordinator for sure. He's been out coached in some cases. They felt that Lincoln Riley ran circles around him in that game for sure. So yeah, probably my take would probably be more, if we're talking about the offense, they're on track, but defensively, it's very disappointing that they're not more consistently better this year.
Yeah, and I think that the Martindale, stuff that the fans have been getting at, I think is valid. He does blitz too much, in my opinion. You have one of the best defensive lines, not in the nation this season, but a very good defensive line, one of the best ones in the Big Ten at the very least this season. And you're not relying on them enough. You're continuing to bring pressure, and you're continuing to simulated pressure. I get that, but you don't need to be blitzing 50% of the time with this defensive line. Does a team like Nebraska need to blitz 50% of the time? Yeah, because they don't have the defensive line to be able to get pressure on the quarterback. But Michigan does not need to do that, but Wink Martindale still does it, and it's concerning to me that he is not adjusting as much as I think he should. So I definitely get the concerns about Martindale, and I get some concerns about Sherrone Moore. I'm not totally out on Sherrone Moore yet. I want to see how he finishes out the season, but he's a second year head coach. Like, he's going to learn on the job. This is what you should expect when you hire a brand new head coach, is what it is. Jeff, what did you learn about Washington in this one?
So, not surprised in their performance. They've got travel issues, and the travel issues have continued. They are 1-6 in the Big Ten on road games. So 1-6 the last 2 years, and to me that reflects coaching. So I think Jed Fish is a good coach. I just don't think he's a great coach. And we're gonna talk about Oregon later, but they have no such issues there, and that reflects coaching as well. So, and the other thing with Washington, why it didn't surprise me just on this game specifically, JR, this is their 5th straight game, and they've had a lot. They had the Ohio State game, which is super emotional. You lose that. Then they had to come from behind, travel across the country. I just thought they would come in kind of mentally tired as well. It's like I said, I'm not convinced. I think if you meet on neutral field, I think I'd like Washington, frankly. But I really liked Michigan in that game. And because they haven't figured out the travel issue, and that's a coaching thing, I believe, as well. Getting used to that. It's a process to learn what does your team react to, what's the right formula on the road, right, when you travel multiple time zones. And some coaches are better than others, and hopefully with experience, Washington will get better. But right now, they struggle.
Yeah, I don't want to completely put the blame on travel, and I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying I'm going to get away from that to go to something else. But I do think it's legitimate, and I do think it's something that needs to be brought up.
I think it's the other factor. Yeah.
Right. But I think for me, the thing that I learned about Washington in this one is that there's only so much that Damon Williams can do. And in this game, and I think this is what you're going to see. Not only was this a road game, and I think it's easy to blame it on that, and I think it is accurate in some circumstances as well, but this to me was more about a good defensive line for Michigan and a beat-up offensive line for Washington. Damon Williams is very shifty, very fast, and can do a lot of things in the pocket, but Michigan, not only are they a talented defensive line, they're a disciplined defensive line as well. The way they rush and the way they rush together, the quarterback does make it very difficult on quarterbacks. We've seen it happen this season with not just Damon Williams, but other quarterbacks struggle to be able to get away from pressure. Dylan Raiola is obviously somebody that struggled all season, but he struggled immensely in that game against Michigan. It wasn't just because Michigan had good pass rushers. It's because they rushed together as a unit and do a good job of being able to make plays happen, and sometimes that is aided by the blitz. So I'm not saying Wink Martindale shouldn't blitz at all. I just think sometimes he blitzes a little too much, but overall still very good defensive line play in this one for Michigan, as their Michigan fans have come to know, and difficult for Damon Williams to be able to navigate that. So all right, anything else on this one, Jeff?
No, and I agree with you too. I mean, Washington still needs to be better in the trenches, like every West Coast school, probably except Oregon, although Oregon could even be a little better in some ways too. But they're closer, right? Oregon's closer to where you need to be to consistently win in the Big Ten in the trenches. And the other 3 schools need to get better.
Yeah, and Philip brings up a good point as well. Need to lean more on Coleman, and it's tough because the holes were not exactly there the entire game. But you can't just completely abandon the run. You can't put all like we have to remember. Damon Williams, this is his 9th start in his career. This is not a 2-year, 3-year start or anything like that. Damon Williams is still only on his 9th start of his career. I know we saw him a lot last season, but he's got everything on his plate right now. It's a lot to handle. You need help from a running game to help him out. So, all right, let's get to Minnesota and Nebraska. Jeff, Minnesota won this one 24-6. Surprising to some people, not surprising to the Minnesota fans. They were in my chat afterward telling me, they maybe not they expected this, but they knew that they could do this for sure. And I knew Minnesota could do this. I just questioned if it was going to happen because Nebraska had looked pretty good lately, and Minnesota just came off that game against Purdue, right? Well, the thing that I did not take into account enough, and I should take it into account more because I know this, but it's that PJ Fleck is a really good coach, and PJ Fleck was going to get his guys ready for this game. They were going to protect home field in this one and get his guys amped up, and they were not going to have another clunker like they did against Purdue. They came out again in that Purdue game and won, which was great for them, but they came out in this Nebraska game and looked on fire. 9 sacks in this game for Minnesota. It was an exceptional effort from the players. A very well-coached game by PJ Fleck. They deserve a lot of praise in this one. What did you learn about Minnesota, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, confirms Minnesota Fleck. If Zach was on here, he'd laugh at this. They're kind of like another version of Iowa, just steady, and that's a compliment here. Steady as can be, really good coach, knows how to leverage the talent that they do have, recruit players to fit their culture. They know who they are, and that's going to win a lot of football games. Now, you are going to have a limited ceiling. The good news for Minnesota with Drake Lindsey, the quarterback, maybe that raises the ceiling as we move forward versus Iowa continuing to struggle to get a pure throwing quarterback, right? So I think the caveat there is maybe Minnesota has a higher upside with a Lindsey. But Fleck is quirky and everything, and if you're a Nebraska fan, you hate him because he'd be just annoying and everything, but he's just a good coach. And if you would ask anyone outside the Big Ten that knows football, it'd be a lot of compliments for PJ Fleck. So that's my takeaway, just the consistency of that program. They're always going to win a lot of games, but they do have a limited ceiling. Hopefully Lindsey will raise it.
Yeah, I think they used a good point about the Iowa thing. You saw in this game that Minnesota got to play the game they wanted to play. And I think when Minnesota plays the game they want to play, they can beat probably 15 to 16 different teams in this conference. In fact, I think it's a good bet. They would beat most teams in this conference. When they get out there, they have home field advantage and they play the game that they want to play. PJ Fleck, he put on a masterclass in this game of doing exactly what he wanted to do. Stop the run, put pressure on Dylan Raiola, run the ball himself, and then utilize his quarterback to be a steady, consistent player down the field and take shots when you need to take them, but also just take the underneath stuff to keep the drive going and keep moving the ball down the field. I learned that the Cal game is not indicative of who this team is. For too long, I was thinking, okay, that Cal game, unfortunately, that was my interpretation of who this Minnesota team was. After that Cal game, you had Ohio State, you had the struggle against Purdue, and to me, I took that too much into account. I should have known better, but now, after seeing this game against Nebraska, I don't know if this is indicative of the way they'll be all season long, but I know that this shows that they are not indicative of the team that we saw against Cal. That was a different team, obviously a lot of same players, but it just goes to show PJ Fleck, his coaching, how masterful he is, and how he can get his guys back on track.
Yeah. And remember that Cal game, they were traveling out west with a first-year starting quarterback. Those are just terrible combinations. It's why when Michigan played USC, I was like all over USC. And I said on my Thursday podcast, I mean, Michigan fans came after me on XGR for predicting USC would beat Michigan by 10. But, that's what, with all these games, we have to figure in all these different variables, right, that impact things. But good points there for sure.
Philip is saying Fleck to Penn State because it looks like Matt Rule had an audition to go to Penn State, and he may have failed it in this one. Not a great game for Nebraska. I don't know. I don't think Penn State would ever hire PJ Fleck, nor do I think PJ Fleck is leaving Minnesota anytime soon. But his name gets brought up there in every single coaching search for what. So why not one more? Why not one more to get brought up? But Jeff, what were your thoughts? What did you learn about Nebraska in this game and just their very, very disappointing performance?
Ooh. I can tell you, I listened to a podcast. They are really angry, Nebraska folks. But really, my takeaway first, we alluded to it earlier, in the Big Ten, it's impossible to be a top team if you have a weak offensive line. And Nebraska's offensive line is offensive, if you have to say it. I mean, 9 sacks, that was the most sacks Minnesota has ever had in a game. I heard that on a podcast, by the way. Even going into this game, Nebraska was, I think, had given up 16 sacks on the year. I think they're ranked in the nation like 120 something, and there's only 134 teams. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, and you saw against Michigan how that game went for Nebraska. So this is really kind of depressing for Nebraska. What are you going to do if you don't have a good offensive line? There's only so much. You can't scheme it to be better, really, by significantly better, JR. So just spells problems and limits Nebraska's ceiling just based on this offensive line.
Yeah, and I was going to make the point, Fisherman just made it here. Not all of those sacks were on the offensive line. I mean, Emmett Johnson got completely blown up by, I think it was Kingsbury, which I really like Kingsbury. I made a note on him early on in the season. He's a really good linebacker, in my opinion. Physical, triggers really well. I like him and what he brings to that Minnesota defense. But yeah, I mean, this for Nebraska, it not all being on the offensive line makes it even more concerning, because it does make you wonder, like, what is Matt Rule doing? What is he seeing out there? I can live with Dylan Raiola doesn't have a great first step in the pocket and he gets caught. I can live with that. Like, that happens. That's unfortunate. There's not much you can do about that. But there is just some missed blitz pickups. There is some, putting edge rushers on tight ends and running backs, and it's like, what in the world are we doing here? Anthony Smith had a great game in this one, and I just don't think there are enough adjustments being made right now by the Nebraska coaching staff. And also, ultimately, that comes back on Matt Rule. I learned that Nebraska has improved in some ways, but I can't be fully bought in until I see it for an entire season. I started getting bought in on this Nebraska team. I started thinking, okay, they've turned a corner. They're doing things different, can make it happen. But I can't get there on them until I see it for an entire season.
Yeah, I think that person raised something important. It isn't just the offensive line. It's multiple things. On the podcast, they were saying Raiola is not good at recognizing when he needs to step up into the pocket when he feels pressure. Instead, he wants to bail and go backwards, and he actually runs into the defenders. So he needs to learn when to step in the pocket. So he can learn that, but if he's developed maybe bad habits through high school and everything, that can be a hard thing. So I think that was a good point he raised there. Not just offensive line, but
yeah. Let's see. If Philip says Nebraska loses next week to Northwestern, I don't feel. I am probably picking Nebraska to win that game because they're at home, but I'm not super confident. I don't know. I might pick Northwestern on that one, because that Northwestern defensive line is going to give Nebraska's offensive line fits. If they don't fix it.
Every week I do guess at what the spread is. I could not believe that Nebraska is a 7.5 point initially, at least, JR FanDuel favorite. I thought too high against, Anyway, kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's what I'm definitely be looking at a little bit later on. So we'll see. All right, Jeff, Oregon. If Ohio State, Wisconsin was a horror film, this Oregon Rutgers game was just a straight up murder. I mean, this was like the opening scene to like a Criminal Minds episode or something like that. Except it wasn't a slow burn or anything. It was just. It was actually honestly, it was kind of like one of those. Just like opening scene right away, person dead, and you kind of look back and never really see anything, because that's what Oregon did in this one. They came out firing. There was a thought that we had in the preview of like maybe Rutgers kind of sticks with Oregon for a little bit, but then they eventually pull ahead. Oregon wasn't having any of it. I think it's a really good sign for Oregon and for Dan Lanning as a head coach, and for them, their program, even coming off that Indiana loss that they had against Indiana. They were able to come out in this one and be on fire and take down Rutgers with pretty ease in this one. What did you learn about Rutgers, Jeff? Or not Rutgers. Give me Oregon first. What did you learn about Oregon?
And really, what I learned really is supported by the numbers. Oregon is one of the few Big Ten teams who has not struggled traveling east at all. And that reflects on great coaching. So we talked about that earlier with Washington, right? How they did, but Dan Lanning and his staff has the formula. Oregon's 5-0 traveling east, 2-0 this year. And in fact, of the 5 games, the only game they even struggled was that Wisconsin game last year. And I would argue that game, Oregon was coming off many consecutive games without a bye week, and I think they were mentally fatigued in that one. So just reflects so well on their coaching staff, and the bounce back like that. Not that I was worried about them bouncing back, but with that travel, you just don't know how teams are going to react. But Oregon's figured out the formula.
Yeah, I mean, this Oregon team, the comeback after a tough loss is just, I think, it shows to me not the sole reason, but one of the reasons why Dan Lanning is an elite coach and why nobody should want to be moving on. Not to say Rutgers, I keep getting mixed up. Not to say Oregon fans were saying they wanted to move on from Dan Lanning, but there were some questions of like game planning and stuff like that. Can we win the big games type of stuff? And Dan Lanning, he is still a pretty young coach as well, so there needs to be some patience with him, but he's getting really good players. Oregon obviously is able to do that with how they're committed to NIL and bringing in players, which is phenomenal. I love that Oregon is doing that, and Dan Lanning is just going to continue to move on, and he's not going to get prima donnas who are only worried about their paycheck. And evidence of this game, if you had prima donnas on your team that were just worried about the paycheck, they would have checked out after that Indiana game. They did not. They played really well against Rutgers, and I think it's one more feather and the Dan Lanning cap that, to me, shows why he's at the very least a top 6 coach in all of college football. I would probably argue top 5 in my opinion. But Jeff, Rutgers, what did you learn about Rutgers in this one?
Well, they got that pretty good offense, although it didn't show in this one. But that defense is so bad, even with a good offense, you're never going to be able to outscore someone when the defense is that bad. So 750 yards to them, to the Ducks. What's crazy is under Schiano, so you kind of say, why is this happening? I know he's maybe a takeaway here is the NIL problems at Rutgers, where they really haven't played that game, and now they have a new is it a new athletic director, I think. So they need to get that in order, and to me, that just shows how they're behind in NIL. So maybe that's my takeaway, JR, is because there'd be no way with how Schiano wants to play tough defense, run the ball. I'm just perplexed with how bad Rutgers is, and just not being able to play the NIL game might be the answer of why that defense is so bad. So I certainly don't think he's a bad coach, because he has a history of being a pretty good coach overall.
Yeah, I do think that Rutgers is in a really tough spot right now because Greg Schiano is the best coach you've ever had at Rutgers, in my opinion. And right now he's just not coaching like it. This defense, it's kind of unacceptable that they're playing the way they are this season. But I also look at that and say, what was it? Did they not have enough NIL funds? Did they just mis-ID their guys? A lot of different things. Because they did go out. They got Eric O'Neill. They got Bradley Weaver, 2 edge rushers that people were pretty excited about, one from James Madison, one from Ohio. But they're just not displaying it very well, and that's why, to me, what I learned is that if Ethan Kaliak-Manis and the wide receivers aren't playing well, this team is just a slightly better Wisconsin, in my opinion. I don't know. Wisconsin might be better if you don't have that offense, because the defense for Wisconsin is better overall. Now, not trying to take a shot at Wisconsin. I'm just trying to make the comparison.
Yeah.
So
big problems.
Big problems. All right. Ryan Willett coming in with the $5 super chat. Appreciate you doing that, Ryan. He says Fickell should have been fired as soon as he returned to the locker room. Yeah, not great for Luke Fickell. I don't know what it is. We kind of talked about it earlier. I don't know if they're waiting until the bye week. I don't know if maybe they're buying into some of the hope stuff that Luke Fickell is trying to sell a little bit in the press conferences. I don't know if they're just trying to get rid of their athletic director at the same time as well. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts, Jeff?
I mean, you threw out. Well, I don't think they're looking to retain him, so I just can't imagine. I mean, and if they're looking for people to help with NIL funding and everything, that's not the way to do it. But JR, I think you raised a good point. There's always a reason behind why people do something or wait to do something. And so there's some things that we don't know. You would think after Oregon, that would be the time to do it. But frankly, I would have thought it would have been done earlier than this, with really, especially after the Iowa game, that's one of your big rivals and everything. You had lost to them real bad the previous year. You thought this would be a revenge game, and at home to lose like that. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's really tough, and I think that there was like there was some thought process of maybe Wisconsin was doing this because he could still possibly get to 4 or 5 wins or something like that, and but I mean you can't watch this team, you can't see him get shut out back to back against Iowa and Ohio State, and at home against Ohio State. You can't watch that happen and think, oh yeah, this is a situation where this team can still win 5 games. I don't think there's anybody in Wisconsin that thinks this team can win 5 games at this point, and that's really depressing for the fans. Sorry about that, Ryan, but appreciate the super chat. All right, Jeff, before we get to the next one, please do join us on Tuesday night for the Week 9 preview. We will be previewing all the Week 9 Big Ten games, going through it. Not as many games this week. Got a couple teams on buys, but still going to have a good time previewing all the games there. Join us 9 p.m. on Tuesday Night Live, or you can catch that episode at 6 a.m. the next morning on podcast. All right, Jeff, Penn State at Iowa. Iowa wins this one 25-24. Penn State looked like a team that believed, looked like a team that had some revitalization. I like some of the changes that Terry Smith made. He changed it up with Katron Allen getting more carries. I would have loved to see what this would have looked like with a Drew Aller instead of Ethan Grunkmeyer, but some play calling by Andy Kotelnicki, some stuff like that. In Iowa, they were just a patient team that was able to get the win at the end of the day. Their defense played well. There was, 14 points given up, kind of. The one was on the blocked field goal. What was the other one? Do you remember what it was? I'm blanking right now.
No, I didn't watch this one as heavy as another one.
Yeah,
but
there were a bunch of other ones going on. But anyway, the defense only gave up 14 points. What did you learn about Iowa in this one, Jeff?
So typical Iowa team, really, and typical Iowa game. So really, to me, this might sound weird, but we didn't really learn anything new, JR. And I don't say that as a negative. Iowa consistently wins a lot of football games. They just don't win, a couple big games in one year. They might spring an upset against someone in the year, but they don't string them together, right, to give you the big time season. And yeah, they've made Big Ten championship games. That's been a nature too of being in the Big Ten West. But I say all that, that's not, hopefully Iowa fans don't think that's negative. It's a formula to win a lot of games consistently, and especially at home. They could have easily lost this game. I mean, the Gronowski run at the end of the game, out of nowhere, whatever, 70 yards, and then the next play, the reverse for a touchdown, 2 plays done. I mean, it reminded me of Noel's defenses against Michigan, where you think Ohio State's got things under control, and bam, Michigan's running for this super long run out of nowhere. So that's, I'm speaking toward Penn State on that one, but credit to Iowa for finding a way to win. Their passing game though is not any better, so that's why I'm like, it's kind of typical Iowa. They're last in the Big Ten. They average 131 yards per game, JR. 131 yards per game in passing. That's 30 yards per game, worse than the second worst team in the Big Ten average, right? That's a lot. 30. When you have 18 teams, 30 yards per game. So, and I'm not saying therefore Gronowski is bad, because he's actually a tough kid and, is one of those kids can help you win games. But it's your kind of typical Iowa team. And it also means your ceiling's not too high. JR, it's my takeaway. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm kind of on the passing game stuff as well. Gronowski, he's just not the level of passer that I think some Iowa fans want him to be, and I get that, but I do think that that's not the piece of him that came in, and maybe I should have realized this, but what I learned is that that's not the piece of Gronowski that's going to lead this team to victory. For him, it's going to be the leadership. It's going to be the fiery attitude. It's going to be one more just great leader on this team that, you have Tim Lester, who's doing a better job job with the offense than obviously Brian Ferentz did. The running game is much, much better, and Mark Gronowski adds to that. It was what I wanted all last season with Brendan Sullivan. I wanted him to be able to add to the run game. Mark Gronowski is doing it now. So even with only 2 games, they have passing touchdowns in this season. They have Albany and UMass. Those are the only 2 games that they have passing touchdowns in. There was some light there at the end of the tunnel with Rutgers and Wisconsin. The passing game looked a little bit better in those games, but those are 2 of the worst secondaries, not only in the Big Ten, but in all of college football. So you have to be able to pass against those teams. You still only had like 109 yards passing against Wisconsin in that one. So tough stuff there, but yeah, this is this is how Iowa is going to win, not with the passing game, but through fiery leadership, patience, and being able to win with being able to make the right decisions in good situational football. So
I agree with that.
What did you learn about Penn State, Jeff?
Well, I'm going to pose it as a question. Has any Big Ten coordinator been more disappointing than Jim Knowles? And I'm not saying new to their job. I'm saying
Andy Kotelnicki might be.
Well, let me throw some stats at you then, JR.
Okay.
Because in the past, we've said this for years, the defense is not the issue for Penn State, but they were fired up to get Knowles because maybe they could take them to even the next level. They were already really good. I don't know if I'd call them elite because Penn State, you've always been able to run on them, frankly, and that's why they hadn't been beating Michigan lately and why Ohio State was able to close the game out last year. But 245 rush yards they gave up to Iowa, 7.4 yards per carry. They know Iowa can't throw the ball. We just went through that, and you're going to give up 245 yards on the ground when the other team can't throw the ball? I mean, that's really bad. They're 10th in the Big Ten in overall defense, like 71st in the nation as of last week. And then in the Big Ten in rush defense, Jared, they're 3rd worst in the Big Ten. If you can't stop the run in the Big Ten, I mean, that's really – they're 3-4 more. I know Drew Aller gets a lot of talk and everything, and they haven't been great, and he's got his issues. He couldn't throw certain passes. But that defense has been the real disappointment, and Jim Knowles is a leader. And I'm not saying Jim Knowles is a bad defensive coordinator, by the way. We know Ohio State fans would tell you it's a complicated defense that takes a while to learn. But the fact that they're this bad and he hasn't helped simplify it means he's done a bad job this year.
Yeah, it's not been good for the defense, and I do get what you're saying, and I think a lot of it is the linebackers this season. Fisherman just pointed out as well, Penn State's linebackers aren't good. And I was never high on the linebackers going into the season. I liked Amari Campbell for some of his ability. I thought he was more athletic, had a better trigger than I've seen out of Dom DeLuca and Tony Rojas. But Tony Rojas getting hurt doesn't help this whole defense either. I have a very simple thing that I learned, and I think that once I say it, people will just kind of get it. I don't know if I need to expand on it too much. There is a brand out there called SEC Pretty. Have you ever heard of it, Jeff? It's like a clothing brand for SEC stuff. Andy Kotelnicki is making this look like Penn State pretty at this point. This is a team that does not they do not play hard-nosed football, in my opinion. They do too much gimmicky stuff. They're trying to, flash this, flash that. And I thought maybe Terry Smith would bring some of that in a little bit. I do like that they tried to involve Luke Reynolds a little bit more in this one, but I mean, I get that you don't feel confident in your quarterback, but like, the only player on this Penn State offense that does not remind me of Penn State pretty at this point is Kaytron Allen. I really, really like Kaytron Allen, but overall, this offense does not look good. This offense does not look tough, and this offense is not being led by somebody who is trying to have a physical offense, in my opinion. It's ran by Andy Kotelnicki, who was more enthralled with having gimmicks in his offense than he is with trying to run an effective, consistent offense, in my opinion. So listen, I don't have a whole bunch of stats like you have. I just watch the game and say, I don't like this.
So I do have a stat for listening to a Penn State podcast. The one big thing they've been complaining about is how Kaytron Allen, way better yards per carry coming in. I don't have that stat in front of me, 6 point something per carry. And Singleton's been averaging 3 point something. So in this game, Kaytron Allen had a career high for carries. So that was the one thing Penn State fans liked about it. But everything else, it was kind of the same, JR. So overall, they obviously weren't super excited because they lost the game, but at least they're, they want to lean on Kaytron more and just have Singleton be like a secondary figure for running backs.
Very good. Yeah. All right. Got a couple super chats. Wanted to make sure we got through that segment and then we get to him. Ryan Willie came back and says rumors are flying that he'll return next year. I saw that. Yeah, there's some stuff on the message boards and everything that'll return. I don't know how you could sell that to the fans for Luke Fickell. I don't know. Could you Bleav in that at all, Jeff? Like I couldn't.
Oh,
I don't know how they would continue to get fans to go to games if they did that.
I don't. Yeah, what would be the reason? I mean,
they do have like some good young players, right? Like there are some players that have a hope and a future at this point, but are all of those players really going to stick around? Like I know that they're not like redshirting and like preserving their year of eligibility by only playing 4 games, but you're going to tell me all of these, Peterson, Allegro, all these, I don't remember if Peterson's a senior or not, but you're going to tell me all of these young players that are showing some stuff are going to stick around for next year?
Yeah, and their recruiting it's improved under him just by ratings, but they don't have a bell cow quarterback or something that if
they're going to lose recruits. Yeah.
Yeah. And it would only make sense. I mean, that would tell me that Wisconsin doesn't believe they could really get a good alternative coach, right? Because they say, you make a move because you feel you can get a better coach. And in some case, like Penn State, it's kind of risky because they're winning at a high enough level where, yeah, you could drop off. But Penn State fans, believe me, they're like, don't tell us. We understand it could drop off. We still want to go for more than we're getting. So to answer your question, Jay, I don't understand. I don't think that makes any sense why he'd be retained.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I mean, when you got everything else going on, Mike Norvell rumored to be fired. Billy Napier just got fired. James Franklin got fired last week. Like you would think that it couldn't happen, but maybe it does. Who knows? Dave also with a super chat. Thank you for the $5, Dave. He says Minnesota has to keep Iowa quarterback at bay and make him throw the ball. And I think that they have a better opportunity to do that. Iowa's offensive line does make that really difficult to do, and they do run some stuff that I think allows him to get out in space a little bit more, but it's perplexing to me that he is able to get out in spaces, make as many plays as he is with an injured knee right now. It's interesting that that's able to kind of go on. We'll see if it, continues to affect him against Minnesota or not. He does not look as explosive to me as he did previously, but like I said, he's still a really fiery guy. He's got good leadership and he gets his guys ready for the game. And there's a lot about that as a quarterback that's really, really good. Any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Well, yeah, no, I won't add that. My thought is, why is Iowa favored by 7.5? Given now they're not exactly have explosive. That really surprised. I guess the thought is Minnesota is just a different team on the road than at home. But yeah, but you're right. I mean, he's not dynamic. So kind of like Ohio State did a great job with Damon Williams Jr. And I don't know, we're talking apples to oranges here, but you got to keep Williams in the pocket and make him make throws, and then he won't hurt you as much. Kind of the same here a little bit, even though he's a power runner, right? Make him make throws from the pocket, though, is what you want. And with Minnesota's ball hawking defense, Coy Parrots and everything, get those turnovers, that's a good recipe to win.
Yeah, if I'm Minnesota, I'm bringing both safeties into the box pretty much the entire game. I might do a cover one at some point, but yeah, as you mentioned in this game, Iowa at home on FanDuel, they're favored by 7.5. The over under set at 39.5. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting one. We'll have to see how that one plays out. Thank you for the super chat, Dave. We appreciate it. Dave says also that Tim Brewster can recruit. He just couldn't coach. Thank you for the $2 there, Dave. Yeah, who's Tim Brewster again?
So he was so I got the history. So he was hired by Minnesota 2000. He's coached 2010 or something, and really was known as a really good recruiter. I don't think he was ever a head coach, so that was his first head coaching job. Maybe Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but he's kind of like a Mike Loxley, like a really good recruiter, but never got the results. And I was at the game, the first game I went to for my nephews as a little reunion, Wisconsin game, and Bielema went for 2 like late in the game when he was up by like 20 or something, and he scored and went for 2 when it was like 2 minutes left. And him and Brewster and Bielema had words at for the handshake. So I just remember that, JR. It was like about 2010-ish or so. He was coach of Minnesota.
Well, and I think in today's day and age where there is so much more parity in college football, I don't think you can just win games by out recruiting teams as much, especially at a Wisconsin. I don't think that you're just going to be able to do that, or in a Minnesota, right? If you're hiring at a place like Minnesota or Wisconsin, like take a page out of what Iowa has done with Kirk Ferentz. Just a really good in-game coach, good leader in Kirk Ferentz. That's what Minnesota did with PJ Fleck. PJ Fleck makes some decisions in game that I'm, not a super big fan of, but he really good with his players, really good leader. He knows what he wants to do, and he's confident in himself. I don't see Luke Fickell confident in himself right now, and I think that's a big issue, personally. So, all right, let's get to, we have 2 games left here, Jeff. Maryland at UCLA. Boy, Maryland gives it up in the fourth quarter once again. They gave it up 2 weeks ago against Washington. They gave it up last week against Nebraska. This one, they tie it up 17-17 with 40 minutes left in the game, and UCLA drives right down the field, hits a field goal as time expires. And for Maryland, it's not looking great for Mike Locksley right now. We'll get to him in a minute. But UCLA, Jeff, what did you learn about them?
So 2 things, really. One, they really have a belief now we're going to find a way to win, and that kind of what happened in this game. On the downside, Nico Iamaleava upside as a passer is really questionable. So 2 really bad INTs in this one that was like atrocious. On the year, he's 10 TDs to 5 interceptions. And he's just the way he throws and his takeaway and everything, the ball sometimes can take off. And I just think at the college level, his run ability saves him. That's not going to save him in the NFL. You can't make money. You can, if you're a good passer, you can use running to supplement your good passing, but you got to be a good passer. So I just wonder him as an NFL passer. It definitely tells me, no way in hell should he. I don't know if he's even given a thought process to go pro or anything, but there's no way. He's got a lot to work on still, for that consistency of how he throws the ball. But bigger point, UCLA just really under this new staff, really believing we're going to find a way to win football games, and that's good for UCLA.
Yeah, Fisherman says, is Nico okay? He did twist his knee in that one. Did you hear Skipper talk about his injury post-game? I heard it in like a clip on Twitter where he was talking about it a little bit, and so I didn't really get the full context of it. I almost wonder if Tim Skipper is not, the best in press conferences yet. He's been an assistant head coach at multiple different places, but he's not really been the guy. He was an interim head coach. He was an acting head coach at Fresno State at one point. So, but he's not really been the guy, and so everybody's kind of different like that, but. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens next game, or I'll be listening to Tim Skipper's press conference here for the next one. But yeah, that's bad news if Nico can't go. It's gonna be interesting there. My thing that I learned about UCLA is this isn't just a team with a talented QB that can make things happen with his legs, right? With really good traits, and that's what's going to get Nico to the NFL, if nothing else, is his traits, right? His size, his strength, everything else, and his running ability. Teams are going to see that, and they're going to draft him early in the draft, if not this year, next year, most likely. But this is a team that believes in each other right now. And I know that's kind of a crappy, like, what did we learn? Because we want to talk about the game. It's kind of like the Wisconsin one where it's kind of like off the field, but I think it really meant something that UCLA in this one, you've kind of seen them kind of taper off in the first half and then kind of come back a little bit in the second half. And that did happen with the offense in this one for UCLA, but the defense was able to hold strong. It looked like they believed in each other. It looked like, and you heard Tim Skipper kind of talking about it in the press conference afterward. He said, what did he say? He said, I found out that we believed, or something like that. And I think that's a really big step for UCLA. Now, unfortunately for them, they play IU this week. So, Bleav you can beat IU. We saw how that worked out last year, but who knows? Belief is a powerful thing. Maybe UCLA will give Indiana a good game. I wouldn't bet on it, but who knows? Maybe it could happen.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, believing you can win is so important in sports in general, not just football. So,
and believing in your teammates, right? I mean, believe in them. So, yeah. EVS says don't count them out. I'm not counting them out by any means. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying I'm not got to pick it personally, but we'll see. Crazier things have happened, i.e. Penn State. All right, what did you learn about Maryland in this one, Jeff?
I guess I'm just going to flip it around. Unlike UCLA, they kind of lack the belief we are going to pull it out, and we're going to win 3 straight losses by a combined 10 points. And, I chose UCLA here. I didn't get it, actually. It was a 3.5 point spread, so I chose UCLA, and I lost by a half point. But, Loxley in October is a real thing. That's another takeaway, JR. And I had that in my write-up too, and why I was taking UCLA. In addition, they had the momentum and everything. But Maryland, since the start of 2023, is 1-8 in October. 1-8 in October. So I can't explain why that would be, because after October, they actually then start winning again a little bit, JR. So I don't understand here. But it just might be something with the coaching staff and not having that culture of really believing it doesn't matter what month it is. We're going to win. We're going to win this football game, right? And Maryland just doesn't have that right now. But on the positive side, folks, Loxley, young team, I think they can learn to win. There's no way he should make a move with the young quarterback, all that talent. A lot different than Wisconsin. If you let Loxley go, you're going to lose all that talent and really be starting from scratch. It would be stupid. So Maryland still, keep Loxley, hope they learn how to win these close games. And that's my takeaway.
I think Loxley needs to win at least one more game to have a chance to stay. If he does not win one more game, I think Loxley is fired. And I don't even know if that's a guarantee. I feel like the way they started this season and the beating Wisconsin was almost like, I wouldn't say it was bad, but it was like it kind of gave some hope that maybe the fan base wasn't anticipating. And now sitting at 4 wins, what are they, 4-3 right now, losing those 3 games the way you did, it's making the fan base upset. And honestly, like the thing I learned in this one, and I kind of another little bit off the field type of thing here, but I'm starting to learn what Mark Turgeon would have been like if it was on the football field right now, because Mark Turgeon, it feels like the fan base is very much so to Mike Loxley the way they were with Mark Turgeon when everything started happening with him, right? The team was kind of starting to go downhill. You were starting to see stuff that was frustrating for the fans over and over again. We just had the conversation on the Power Rankings episode with Larry and a few other Maryland fans where it's like, you're having these targetings again and again and again. 2 games ago with Sidney Stewart, this game with Jalen Husky, and who was the other one that had the targeting in this one as well? I'm blanking on who it was, but there was another targeting in this game. You're having these targetings happening again and again and again. I don't know if I blame the coaching staff on it, but the Maryland fans do make good points that it's happening again and again and again. And so there is a consistent there somewhere. Maybe it's the coaching staff, maybe it's the players, maybe it's just bad luck. Who knows? But it's definitely something that is frustrating the fan base, and I can't tell the fan base not to be frustrated, because if I were them, I would be frustrated too. But I do tend to agree with you, Jeff. You cannot lose the talent that you have on this team right now. With Zion Ely coming in, like, you have to do whatever you can to keep this talent, even if it means keeping Mike Loxley, who, has shown that he's not going to win games in October very often.
Yeah, and the reason I'm saying they're so close to winning these games, right? It could be one play. I watched most of the UCLA game. It was one of those one play games either way, So, but I get the frustration, and I'm not saying I think Loxley next year it's going to be wonderful, because I do question him, but I don't question the talent they have. I mean, it's impressive. Just so many young players, and they're way better than I thought. And I think you would definitely give him another year in my book, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, you also have to recognize that Maryland is working with 2 new coordinators this season as well, Pep Hamilton and Ted Monachino. We kind of talk about Jim Knowles coming in and running his defense and needing some time. Maybe those guys just need some time as well. So it's frustrating for sure. I don't blame the fans for being frustrated, but I think as long as Maryland makes a bowl, they're fine. Mike Loxley's probably fine with 5 wins, but we'll see. He has to get at least one more. Otherwise, I think he's gone if he doesn't get to 5 wins. So that's an interesting thought there, Billy. He says Franklin to Maryland would make sense. He could keep the talent on the roster, and he could keep getting talent, right? He's recruited that area. He's done a really good job of being able to get players from Maryland and from the Maryland area to be able to bring them in. So I don't think he would go there. I think he'd probably have better opportunities someplace else, but who knows? Maybe not. We'll see. All right, Jeff, last one here. We have USC at Notre Dame. USC loses this one 24-34. Close game. And then the rain started to come down and the play calling started to turn up a little bit for USC. We're not going to do what we learned about Notre Dame because they're not in the Big Ten, but we will do USC. Jeff, what did you learn about USC in this game?
So I know it's frustrating because this could have been the true signature win for Riley under USC. I actually, though, think Notre Dame is a really good football team. I know they struggled on defense early, but they're getting better and better. And with CJ Carr emerging like he is, I mean, I just think Notre Dame's the real deal. I know they lost a couple games. So I'm not I'm not surprised either because USC still, even though they beat Michigan in the trenches last week, they're not consistent in the trenches. They lost in the trenches to Illinois, right? And again, a travel game. I don't know what happens with the travel. I mean, it's still a football field, right? It's kind of crazy that it would have that much big of a difference. But, I still think USC is a top 25 team, I guess, JR, is my takeaway. The defense is clearly not where it needs to be, but it has potential still. I just think Notre Dame had too much firepower, and those running backs are legit really good for Notre Dame. And USC was missing their top running backs. I know that one guy had a big game last week, but he still, hadn't been playing up till now for a reason, right? So, but they need to figure out the defense. All the NIL money needs to go toward everything defense. Riley will figure it out with average talent. He'll have a really good offense with average. Spend all your NIL money on defense. That's my takeaway.
Well, it was so interesting, right? Because it felt like this USC's front seven was kind of the piece of this team, at least on the defense, that was looking better this season. You were concerned about the cornerbacks, but the safeties were doing enough to help them out. Kamari Ramsey, Bishop Fitzgerald has been very good this season. I Bleav he has 5 interceptions on the year. I think he leads the country if somebody didn't pass him this past week. But it's been a good defense for the most part. It's just that running game for Notre Dame just completely destroyed them. And I think USC was expecting Notre Dame to utilize the passing game more with how CJ Carr has been playing lately, but they didn't because they went away from CJ Carr because he just wasn't playing up to the way he's played lately, and they went to Jeremiah Love, they went to Jadarian Price, and I think it caught USC off guard a little bit when they started going to them more. And so for them, I'm not trying to make excuses for USC at all. They do definitely, I agree with you, they need to figure that out and get better at that. But at the same time, it's like the defense did perform well in the secondary, which I thought was their biggest weakness going into the game. It's just kind of crazy that it kind of flip-flopped like that. But to me, the biggest issue is Lincoln Riley and the way that he runs this team. You brought it up in the preseason. I'm going to bring it up now. And I'm going to make a bold statement. If I'm proven wrong on this, so be it. But I do not think, with how much parity there is in college football right now, especially in the Big Ten, with how the conference has grown and gotten better, I do not think a Big Ten team's I do not think a Big Ten team can win a championship, national or Big Ten championship, if your offensive play caller is your head coach. I just do not think it can happen. I'm not saying fire Lincoln Riley, but I am saying he needs to give that up and follow the Ryan Day path and become more of the CEO of the team. I just think it's too important right now to have good in-game coaching if you want to go out, make the playoffs, win a Big Ten championship. I think USC can make the playoffs. I'm not saying they can't do that, but I don't think they're ever going to win a Big Ten championship as long as Lincoln Riley is calling plays.
And many podcasters for USC have complained about that for the last couple of years for sure. Billy Napier, that was a big thing. People still don't understand why he didn't give up the play calling duties as well. So, and the other criticism, and he can call a great game, but sometimes when he gets away from the run, I think against Michigan, he didn't get away from the run, JR, but in maybe as a coach that's not calling plays, to your point, JR, you can kind of take that bird's eye view and tell your offensive coordinator, listen, why aren't we doing more of that, right? And kind of advise. and he would be great at that, right? Because he has such a good feel for things. And just because he's not calling plays doesn't mean he's not involved. They put together, here's the plays we're going to be running, and then the offensive coordinator is deciding what plays to run. It's not like they're, calling any play they have in the book. They agree on, here's the plays we're running that game, and it's a matter of when the coordinator calls to call that play. So I say all that to say I do think that could be a good idea. He would still have his hands in important moments on when to call because he's good at it, but it would allow him to step back a little bit, right? And you get some other benefit from that.
Well, and he needs to find somebody he trusts. I hate to keep bringing this back to Ohio State, but I just think it was such an important thing for offensive head coaches to look at and say, look what Ryan Day did. He finally gave up the play call, and he went out, hired his mentor in Chip Kelly, somebody that he trusts to go out there and call plays. And he talks about it like he had influence in the play calling as well. He wasn't out there making every single play call, but he was in there talking with Chip Kelly and doing some of those things. And I think that's the hard part for some of these offensive play calling head coaches is I don't think they're comfortable not having every single play call be coming from them. I think
they're kind of control freaks. Coaches are control freaks, and to give that up, and also if they became a head coach because of their ability to call plays and set game plans, and to give that up, it's like giving up their baby, so they just don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm. Illini Bubba says day 1-2 Big Ten championships calling offense. And that's why I prefaced it with how the Big Ten has changed with more parity and better teams in the conference now. I think you could get away with it in the past when you just had superior talent than everybody else. But I don't think Ryan Day was ever going to win a national championship calling plays. I think he could get away with winning Big Ten championships calling plays because he had the talent. But I think now in today's day and age, it won't happen.
Yeah, the other factor is what JR is saying. With NIL and managing rosters and how a head coach is more like GM, now they're trying to hire GMs to like alleviate that, but you have way more on your plate than you used to as a head coach than back in the day too.
Yeah. Other side note on this game, and then we'll end it here. Do you think they're gonna keep playing this game, Jeff? They want to keep playing it. They say. I did a video on this when it first came up. The reason why they didn't want to play the game was because the SEC was playing 8 conference games, and USC didn't want to have a 10th, Power 4 game that was kind of like an extension of the conference, especially if they wanted to play another out-of-conference game like that LSU game where they had 11 Power 4 teams on that schedule. Now they are willing to play it. I think it's evidence because of SEC having 9 conference games. They just want to play it at the beginning of the season instead of in the midst of their conference play, which I totally understand. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, so I'm a believer, unfortunately, that when you have a big non-conference game, you have more to lose than you do to gain. And I'm not saying you don't have a lot to gain. If you win the game, you gain a lot. But if you lose the game, you lose more because everyone's like, well, they've got 3 losses. Like, people are going to talk about USC. They have 3 losses. And at the end of the year, if they hadn't played Notre Dame on the road, they would have 2 losses, and they probably would make the playoffs. So just them playing Notre Dame and getting that 3rd loss might knock them out. And that is a disincentive to play big non-conference games, and it makes it worse for us fans. So I think SC is not going to want to do it. And Notre Dame does want to do it because they know they need good games like USC, right? Notre Dame's problem is, too, they schedule games out in advance and assuming teams are going to be good, and then, Florida State's not any good. Great. I thought, this was going to be a good one for us, and it's not. Or Stanford, right? They were really good for a while. Now they're not so good, although they beat Clemson yesterday. But anyway.
Notre Dame is Notre Dame's going to help with that a little bit with their new agreement with the ACC to play like Clemson and Florida State more often. But, who's good this season in the ACC? Not Clemson, not Florida State. So,
like, that's 3 and 4. Yeah.
Right. Like you're also hitching your wagon to the ACC right now, which, Miami's good this season. But then they just lost to Louisville this year. So, they're not as good as they once were, and they don't even play them. So I do wonder how this is going to impact things. I think if you're Notre Dame, you have to keep playing USC, even if it's at their time frame. Yeah, I would love to see USC Notre Dame be the game that opens the year every single season for those two teams, kind of like how Ohio State, Michigan is their last game of the season every year. I would love to see Notre Dame and USC do that, but
and how about the old Notre Dame Michigan games? Those were awesome.
That needs to stay as well,
right?
Yeah, but Notre Dame, just join the Big Ten. All this would be so much easier. Just join the Big Ten. All right, stop it. Stop with the stupid tradition.
I'm not gonna say
keep the other tradition. Doreen's in here and she shared the stream. Thank you for doing that, Doreen, and coming in with a compliment. JR, you're doing great content. Thank you, Doreen. We appreciate you being here, your encouragement, and coming in and supporting the show and everything, and doing all that stuff. Anybody else, if you shared the stream out there, appreciate you doing that as well. Unfortunately, I don't see every single person that pops up, but we appreciate that. So, all right, Jeff, that's our Week 8 recap there. Anything else in Week 8 you wanted to talk about before we move on to the second segment?
No, other than just a plug for my Thursday night. I choose 5 games. I choose 5 games that are the most competitive. So they're not the ones I feel most confident in. So that's why my record, I think it's gotten to 500, JR. I'm back to 500. But I gave you all the reasons to choose one team versus another. And I think you can really use that to kind of judge, am I missing something to go with one team or another? Go in depth on that. Big Jeff's Insight every Thursday night. For now, I'm recording it because I'm kind of on my own. We'll see down the line if we bring it back to being live. So tune into that Thursday nights.
Very good. Yes, go check out Jeff. He does a great job and really goes in depth into the games. And he had his Big Ten tiers and stuff like that in there as well. So Blue Wolverine coming in with a $10 super sticker. Thank you, Blue Wolverine. Really appreciate you supporting the show. Coming in, the super chats and the super sticker really means a lot to the show, and we very much appreciate you doing that. Thank you, Blue Wolverine. You are awesome. We appreciate it. All right, hey, we're gonna end segment 1 here. So if you're listening on podcast, we will see you tomorrow. If you're listening on YouTube, stick with us. We're gonna take a quick break, really quick, and then we'll be right back for segment 2, where we are going to react to the AP poll, and we're gonna give our top 25s. And in this one, it's gonna be interesting because Jeff has a little bit of a different take on the top 25 than I do. So we're not just going to be reacting to the AP poll, but Jeff will be reacting to mine, which is a little different, and I'll be reacting to Jeff's, which is a little bit different. Might be some debate in this one. Should be a good time. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. We appreciate you being here, listening in as we react to the AP poll. AP Top 25 dropped Sunday afternoon, and we have thoughts. I have thoughts about some SEC teams that do not belong, and we have Jeff here to give us a bit of a different perspective. Zach and I have been pretty lockstep in our AP Top 25, I guess not AP, in our top 25s. Jeff has a little bit of a different opinion, and I'm excited to go through that together. Jeff, was this your first time making a top 25 this season?
No, I've done it on my own, but I did like weeks 2 through 5, and then the last 2 weeks I didn't. So it really made it interesting, JR, to for the first time in 3 weeks do it. It's not easy to do. God, you get into that. Now, did that team play another? But yeah, this should be fun.
Oh, yeah. It's more difficult this season than it's been in a while. And so I don't go after the AP voters as much. I just try to kind of pick apart this, that, and the other. And I do try to remind people this is an average. This is not like somebody going through and picking each one and like it's one person voting. This is an average. And so sometimes it doesn't always work out the right way. But it's interesting how it does that. So let's go ahead, bring up the AP poll here. I will go ahead and give it to our podcast listeners really quick, and then we'll go to Jeff for his reaction. Ohio State stays at number 1. Indiana sets another program record as they move up to number 2. Awesome for IU. Followed by Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia at number 5. At number 6, you have Oregon, Georgia Tech moving up to number 7. Ole Miss, Miami, and Vanderbilt gets into the top 10, sneaks in there at number 10. BYU, the undefeated Cougars at number 11, followed by Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Texas Tech, Missouri at number 16. Virginia, Tennessee, South Florida, Louisville, LSU stays in there after losing to Vanderbilt. And then at number 21, Cincinnati moves on up. Texas, Illinois, Arizona State. Finishing off the pack is the Michigan Wolverines at number 25. Jeff, what was your first reaction to seeing the AP poll?
Yeah, a lot of SEC teams in here. What's funny, JR, is so for everyone know I live so a graduate of Indiana in 1990. I am an Ohio State fan since I was a little kid as well, so I'm a little bit weird. So I'm living in those. So look at this. Here's my first reaction, actually, JR. Ohio State fan since 1979 when I saw Art Schlichter on the cover of Sports Illustrated after Ohio State beat Michigan. So that was 1979. I am 58 years old. Went to Indiana, graduated in 1990. In Indiana, we were actually pretty good in football at the time with Bill Mallory as coach. But since then, we all know the story, right? Indiana all-time losing his program. So my first reaction is this real? Ohio State number 1, JR, in Indiana number 2. My two teams, and they're going to be on a collision course probably to play in the Big Ten championship game. Crazy. And they could play each other again in the playoffs. I mean, truly, and I can tell you other Indiana fans are like, they're still in shock, right? I mean, at this point, they're not shocked Indiana's good and not top 25 because they believe in Cignetti that much. But the fact that we're even better than we were last year. So that's my first reaction. And then how many SEC teams are in here? I did make a comment to my Georgia friends. I'm on a text string. I said, Ole Miss, they never should have been ranked 5th. It's a good win for Georgia because any conference win is good. But I was like, Ole Miss they didn't deserve to be number 5. They beat a bunch of teams by like just a few points, struggled with Kentucky, played what was it? Oregon State, JR, was it? Or Oregon State or Washington State, and won by like 3 or 5 or 7 or something.
Yeah, Washington State, 24-21.
Yeah. So, in general, for everyone to know, I'm not quite as big of a basher on the SEC as much as JR and Zach, but there are certain teams I think that are frauds. I don't think Ole Miss is great, for example. And I think LSU is also a pretender. There's others that I think are really good, JR. Like, I really think A&M is really good. I watched the whole game at Notre Dame. That game came down to one play, by the way. I mean, literally, like that play in the end zone, I think it was a 4th down. But I'm impressed with them. In Alabama, I am a believer too. One game early on can be deceptive. So I know everyone said, well, they lost to Florida State. How good they can be if Florida State's 3-4. It's the first game of the year. Teams evolve through the year. So Alabama is legit good. We know they had a ton of talent. And the difference is the Ty Simpson just balling out, way better quarterback than Milroe. So I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, JR, but I would say some of these SEC teams deserve it. Others, not so much, I guess, would be my reaction. And then I'm shocked IU and Ohio State, my two teams, are the top 2 teams.
Yeah, I mean, they should be there, right? So it's not shocking because they should be, but I understand what you're saying, like the history and the relevance and stuff like that, and the branding versus some of the other football schools that are up there, Alabama, Georgia, Texas A&M. It is just kind of shocking to see Indiana up above all those. Fisherman says one AP voter had Indiana at 21. Where did you see that at, Fisherman? I pulled up the posters page and I didn't see anybody that had them at 21, but boy, if somebody had them at 21, they ought to lose. Maybe they lost their vote right away when they did that. That's the way that should work if you have Indiana at number 21. But that's honestly pretty crazy if that happens. So, very, very interesting how this AP poll has kind of played out here. I did appreciate that they notched LSU down 10 spots there for losing to Vanderbilt, because that's what they did to Michigan, right? Michigan lost to USC, and they went down, I think it was 11 spots. And so they do have some consistency there with moving LSU down. I appreciate that. I appreciate that Louisville got moved up there. I still do not understand why Tennessee is ranked. I don't understand how you can have Tennessee ranked, but you can't have Illinois ranked up there. To me, Tennessee is the Illinois of the SEC, where they are not a contender in the conference, but their 2 best losses they're getting too much credit for. And I say too much credit because a team like Illinois, who has lost the number 1 and number 2 team in the country, is not getting credit for that. Right? So to me, it's like, if you're going to have credit to Tennessee, you need to give credit to Illinois in that same way. I understand why Illinois isn't getting as much credit as Notre Dame, because Notre Dame just beat USC. But at the same time, Illinois also beat USC. So Why is Illinois not getting as much credit as Notre Dame? I understand it with the brand at a certain point, but at the same time, it's like, how much different is Notre Dame's resume from Illinois'? Notre Dame lost by, closer score margins against teams that are up there, but still, the losses on paper still show that Illinois played better teams than Notre Dame played, and they have a common best win, in my opinion. So, do you have any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, it gets into the, if you lose close, how much credit do you get to that? I do think Illinois, how much they lost to Indiana by, and you can explain it. You can't explain it where it was at Indiana. It was kind of like this running freight train, and then the secondary being so beat up, and then you just, it's not like Illinois mentally quit. You're still battling, but when you know you can't win anymore, something changes. So I think that's what's driving that, JR. But it's almost like you wish for all these teams you could take one game and just throw it out, right? Because and it's the same thing, even if you got the one big win, that doesn't mean you're a great team. It just means everything aligned that day to get that big win, right? I think we all get caught up into that a little bit. So if you're a supporter of Illinois, you would give them grace on the Indiana, but I think a lot of voters won't forget losing by 53 is part of the problem.
Well, it's an issue because like Illinois doesn't get the grace of the one loss like Alabama does, right? People look at that loss, which is a bad loss. That was a bad loss to Florida State. Not only did Florida State beat you, but you did not look like you wanted to be there. That was a really bad loss for Alabama, and just everybody acts like it doesn't happen. Why does that loss for Alabama get consistently brought up? Not consistently brought up. Sorry, nobody brings up that loss, but the loss for Illinois against Indiana gets consistently brought up time and time again when Illinois actually had a good reason with why they lost that much. Still give Indiana credit. I'm not saying you don't give Indiana credit, but it just reminds me of how much the bias is there for the SEC. The SEC gets credit when they win big games. They don't lose any credit when they lose some of those big games or they lose to an opponent that they shouldn't lose to. Texas has lost to Florida, but because they beat Oklahoma, they're back in the top 25. Okay, I understand Texas, but Texas does not have a loss on their schedule or Illinois does not have a loss on their schedule like Texas. Florida just fired their head coach. Texas lost to them 2 weeks ago. They should not be above Illinois, in my opinion.
No,
or if they are going to be above Illinois, you need to have some consistency there to where Illinois is not dragged down for their one loss because Texas and Alabama don't seem to be dragged down for their losses.
Yeah, and to your point, Jared, Illinois, remember, they didn't play last week and they re-entered, so it was the old teams lost in front of. To your point, I would agree. They should have never fallen out of the top 25 at all. You know what I mean? I mean that is a true statement. Michigan, they did fall out last week, and again, it's because they lost so badly to USC. But I still had them as a title contender, so I still felt they are top 25. I kind of felt they shouldn't have even fallen out either. If, to your point, JR, if Michigan were an SEC team after they lost to USC, they would have not fallen out of the top 25 last week.
Yeah, if USC was an SEC team, they would have been in the top 20 with their record and what they've done.
Way higher, yeah.
So, I mean, that was part of the issue too, is that USC isn't getting credit. And that's the hard part about having this conversation a lot of times, because I go to people and I say, well, who has Ole Miss beat? And they say, well, they beat number 4 LSU. When did LSU deserve that? They beat Clemson, who turned out to be awful, and they don't have a good win on their resume. Their best win is South Carolina. It's like I pointed out last week, and everybody wants to dog me for it now because Washington lost, and that's fine, but it doesn't change what I pointed out, which is that 3 different SEC teams, their best win, and still 2 of them, is South Carolina, who is a 3-4 football team. Missouri, why are they ranked up there in the top 15? Their best win is against a bad South Carolina team. Same thing with LSU. You could argue, okay, Vanderbilt got a good win this weekend. Okay, I get that, but should LSU have ever been as high as they were before? Like, it's just kind of the same compounding stuff that happens again and again and again. And since South Carolina had a whole lot of hype going into the season, they were highly ranked. They lost, but they don't seem to lose out on that. On the other hand, Ohio State, everybody wants to say they haven't played anybody, but nobody wants to talk about how LSU hasn't played anybody. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, your point, USC, if they're 5-2 right now, just lost to a tough Notre Dame team. Like if they were an SEC team, they would still be in the top 25 for sure. Now they're just outside. They're just barely. They're 26th right now. But the point is, they should be after Illinois because they lost to them, but before Michigan. And basically, Illinois, SC, and Michigan should be in there, maybe, but higher up, right?
Yeah, I have Illinois, USC, and Michigan, and we'll go to mine just right after this. I have them right outside of the top 10. Admittedly, I might have them a little too high, but with having some different teams up there that have 2 losses and 2 good losses, I feel like those are teams that should all kind of be together, right? So, I mean, I explained this last week, but
yeah, I'm laughing. I just said they should be higher, and actually, I have all 3 of them in the top 25, but just barely in the top 25. So it goes against what I just said. But it also shows when you look at these teams 15 through 25, it's hard to distinguish between them, right? Wouldn't you say? I mean, that's why. But USC, at least in mine, is 25th because I don't think they should drop off. But they're right there.
One comment really quick, and then we'll get to my top 25. Monthly Short says it was like when IU lost by 10 in the playoffs, and everyone talks about it, but nobody talks about Tennessee and Georgia getting absolutely bodied. Yes, and everybody talked about how Indiana lost so terribly to Ohio State, and while yes, they did, what was the score of that game, 38-17 or 38-14 or something like that. Nobody ever brings up that Indiana had more rushing yards in that game. Nobody ever brings up that there were 2 special teams issues that happened in that game, and those were 2 of the reasons why Ohio State kind of pulled ahead. Again, I'm not taking anything away from Ohio State. Ohio State had the opportunities, and they capitalized on them. That's what a good team does. But I don't think that an SEC team gets dinged for 2 special team issues. People will make excuses for them. But of course, the lowly IU brand, they get raked over the coals. They can't beat a big team. They're terrible because their punter fumbled a snap, and their punter punted it to the wrong side of the field, and Caleb Downs took it back for a touchdown. So, yeah. All right. So my top 25 is, let me bring it up here. I have Ohio State, Indiana at number 1 and 2. Shocker. Don't come at me, Big Ten fans, but I do have Alabama at number 3. Again, I'm not saying that Alabama should be held to that Florida State loss super big, but I am saying that if you're not going to hold Alabama to that big loss, I don't think you should hold other teams to a big loss as well, which I think I've done pretty consistently in here. I have Oregon at number 4, followed by Georgia. I'm not as high on Texas A&M as some other people are. I like the offensive line. I think they do some things well, but I am still concerned with some of the close games that they've played against inferior competition. So I have them at number 6, followed by Georgia Tech, Miami, Notre Dame I have at number 9, followed by BYU at 10. Call me crazy, but I have the Fighting Illini at number 11, Oklahoma, Michigan, Vanderbilt, USC. Number 16, I have Texas Tech, then Louisville, South Florida, Cincinnati, Iowa at number 20, Utah at 21, followed by Minnesota, Arizona State. Rank Northwestern. Do it. All right? Rank them. Number 24. Make it happen. And then I still have Washington in there in my top 25 because Washington has lost to a top 15 team and the number 1 team in the nation in my rankings. And they still have a win over Maryland, who has been in close games. They've not looked as impressive lately, but has been in close games, and I still think that Maryland win is a more impressive win than the South Carolina win that Missouri and LSU has.
That's strong, Jay. You have 10 Big Ten teams. Is that right?
I do, yeah. And how many SEC teams do I have? 1, 2, 3. I really should count this. I'm on a Big Ten podcast. I really should not have more SEC. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6? Is that how many?
What? Okay.
No, 5. Yeah, I only have 5 SEC teams in there, if I can count. So what's your reaction here, Jeff? Tear it apart if you want.
Yeah, well, here's the hard thing where it's really hard to tear apart. We don't have enough crossover games for us to really evaluate. Can I really say you're wrong, JR? There's no way Northwestern 24, no way Minnesota. There's not enough crossover between the SEC teams for us to judge it. So that's the frustration with it. And also why we get frustrated when we see all the SEC teams up there, right, JR? I do think Vandy at 14. I have Vanderbilt at 7. So I feel Vanderbilt is being Indiana'd this year. In other words, everyone's like, oh, it's Vanderbilt. They can't be that good. And it's been slow to raise them up. They've only lost one game to Alabama. And we've seen, yeah, they had the bad first loss, but Alabama is a different team as they've built confidence and everything. And they've won since that Florida State loss, right? And so I just put Vanderbilt higher. Now, do I think they have the depth and everything to make a long run in the playoffs and everything? Probably not. But I love how tough they are. Diego Pavia is a tough kid. You know, he's 32 years old and going to get his AARP card in a couple of years here. But anyway, so I would just I do think they're legit and everything, and I would put them higher. Beyond that, I don't have any major issues because I don't get as upset on the AP polls because ultimately the committees, I Bleav, has done a good job and don't necessarily use the AP poll. So in the end, it won't matter. But I get why people get upset with the AP poll because the SEC uses it, and like your Peter Burns of the world who covers the SEC, they use it to say, oh, listen, Georgia must be way better because they beat 5 or 6 ranked teams, and you know, Indiana doesn't even have a ranked team the rest of the year. Well, if the AP poll were better, that wouldn't be the case, right? So it matters. That's a long-winded, but it won't matter for the committee in the end. I really do think they look at other metrics and everything. So no major thing here.
Yeah. I think my point on Vanderbilt with why I have them a little bit lower, because I'm trying to be cautious of that as well. I don't want to Indiana a team and keep them lower.
Right.
But I do look at that Vanderbilt team and say, okay, they lost to Alabama, and that was at Alabama, so I do need to be cautious of that. But Vanderbilt also has the same issue that I have with LSU and Missouri, which is that their best win is South Carolina. So a team that is, I think they're 6-1 right now. A team that is 6-1, who, yes, they did beat the brains in of Virginia Tech at Virginia Tech, but that's also not a good team. They beat the brains in of Georgia State. They beat the brains in of Utah State. They beat South Carolina, and very convincingly, by the way, as well. But it's also like how high can I rank a team like that, right? I did not have BYU even in the top 20 last week, but they got that win over Utah, who I think is a good team, and so I knocked them up to 10. Maybe a little bit too high, but for an undefeated team, I think you need to be in at least contention for the top 10 at this point in the season, even if you've played not a very good schedule, just because I think it's really tough to be able to get there, especially if you're in a power conference. So I understand what you're saying there about Vanderbilt. I do think we need to be cautious of that, but I think we also need to consider who are their wins. And right now, their best win is South Carolina. Well, they just beat LSU, but LSU's in the same scenario, right? South Carolina, the best win, is what I'm kind of getting at there. And then the other thing I'll talk about is that Dave says I would put Pitt over my Gophers, and that is a team that I did not consider, so I appreciate you bringing them up for me, Dave. I did look at their schedule. I don't know if they have a great win on there, but they did lose to 2 teams like the Gophers did. They did beat Syracuse and Florida State, but Syracuse doesn't have their starting quarterback right now. So I'm not going to say I wouldn't do that. I probably need to look into that one a little bit more. So I appreciate you bringing them up, Dave. And then Billy says, don't go public with my Northwestern ranking. maybe I shouldn't. That'll get the SEC fans really upset. Oh, and the other thing, I'm going to start using this. If you see Peter Burns out there talking about ranked wins again, go ahead and remind them that UCLA has more ranked wins than Tennessee and Missouri does. See how they react to that.
But they do, man. Bleav me. And they even have I listen to the Big Ten network or whatever, and the radio show, and they'll bring in SEC for a crossover. And Burns is always talking about, now how many ranked teams are left on their schedule. He's so like trying to make it sound like he's being neutral and really looking at things, but yeah,
he's not. All right, Jeff, let's get to your top 25. You can go ahead and list it off there, and touch on any teams that you want to highlight.
Yeah. So I have Ohio State 1, Indiana 2, and I do agree that Indiana has the best win, Oregon, and you could make an argument for Indiana number one. I wouldn't worry about too much if that happened. I just Bleav Ohio State, that defense has just been crazy good. And then with the development of Julian Sayin, I like them at one. Now, I mentioned A&M earlier, undefeated. They still have a lot to prove, JR, but I just think that win at Notre Dame is looking better and better. So them at 3, Bama is a different team than they were. And I could maybe put Oregon over Alabama. I mean, I almost did that, but I have Oregon over Georgia, and it's reversed in the AP. So Vanderbilt 7. I didn't want to punish Miami too much for one loss because I do Bleav Louisville's a good team. And I know one thing for sure, Jeff Brom is a hell of a coach. And Penn State should be looking at Jeff Brom as one. I'm not saying he should be the coach, but that should be a guy you're talking. To me, you want to hire a coach that has a proof of winning at multiple stops. That's Cignetti. It wasn't winning at one stop. It's everywhere he's been, he's won. And so that's why he's been so successful at Indy, or one of the reasons that's been a successful hire. So Georgia 6, Vanderbilt 7. We talked about them earlier. I think they deserve that, just like Indiana did last year. They got the tough part of their schedule coming, though, JR, the tougher part of their schedule, to your point. Miami 8, Texas Tech 9. I mean, I was surprised they lost to Arizona State. But Arizona State can be an evolving team. They lost to Mississippi State earlier this year. But now maybe they're getting better and getting the legs under them. But I still Bleav Texas Tech is a super talented team. Georgia Tech, they just continue to find ways to win. I don't know how great they are, but they're a tough, hard-nosed team. I love their coach, and they have a tough, hard-nosed quarterback in Haynes King. Oklahoma hanging in there at 11. I think you're going to see them make a fall from here. The schedule is tough and great defense, but if they could run the ball better, I would like their chances to stay high. I have Notre Dame 12th. So did the AP poll, JR. I do think I hate over punishing people for losses, and I know you need to win games now that they're winning again. I feel comfortable putting them there. BYU at 13. To be honest, I haven't even watched BYU, JR. In all these teams, I watch the Big Ten mostly, so it is harder for me to do this. I'm not watching a bunch of SEC games because I'm concentrating on the Big Ten. Ole Miss, I begrudgingly put at 14. I never thought they should have been 5. But they have won games, right? They've only lost the one. Frankly, I think they should have beat Georgia. It was damn close to doing that. Missouri at 15. And I haven't seen a lot of them, but again, I like Drinkwitz a lot as a coach. I think he's really good. Virginia 16, haven't really watched them. Tennessee begrudgingly kept them 17. JR, you probably don't like that. Louisville's one to watch, though. If they're beating Miami, and Brom's a heck of a coach, and they've got Miller Moss. He's an experienced quarterback, so don't forget that. Cincinnati's been so impressive at 19. South Florida at 20. I have Arizona State 21. Then hitting the Big Ten teams, Illinois 22, Texas 23, and only hanging on because of the Oklahoma win. They struggled this week. I saw a stat someone had that coming off the Red River game, both teams really struggle from that. It's such an emotional game. So if next week Texas struggles again, it's like, what in the hell? I mean, but I don't, if you had them outside the top 25, I actually wouldn't complain too much. And then Michigan 24 and USC 25. Again, as mentioned earlier, you could make an argument Illinois, Michigan, and USC all should be higher up, but it's just very hard. This 12, maybe from 13 to 25, very hard to rank these teams in my view.
Yeah, it is. It is difficult. I did not have Texas in my top 25, and I'm not necessarily going to say that I don't like that you have Tennessee there at 17. I just want consistency more than anything.
Yeah.
I can see different arguments for different teams, but my biggest thing is just be consistent with what you have, right? If you're going to give a team credit for this, make sure you give another team credit for that. And I think that's kind of the way it needs to operate more than anything else. So as long as somebody's consistent, I'm not going to come at them too much. If they have like Indiana at number 20, I might, be upset about that. But but you don't have that, Jeff. So you're good. All right, let's get to college football playoff predictions here. My prediction now, the top 25 is the way I think things should be. My college football playoff prediction is much more of the way I think things will play out. So, although, my stuff doesn't necessarily align with my opinions of the top 25, like I have Illinois high up there. I don't think Illinois is going to make the playoffs. If they went out, I think they have a chance to sneak in there at 11 or 10. I think they should be higher than that, but I do not think that Illinois. Like I said, I do not think Illinois is going to be a highly seeded team in the playoffs if they win out. They just don't seem to have enough love out there. So at number 12, I have USF South Florida. At number 11, I have Ole Miss, even though I am not super high on Ole Miss. The AP poll is, and so I think the College Football Playoff Committee will be as well. Number 10, I have Georgia Tech. They have a pretty cake schedule to finish off the year, and I think that they maybe drop one, but even if they do that, they're so high up there, they're probably going to stay in. Texas A&M, I have them losing a game or two to finish the year, so I have them at number 9. Texas Tech, I think that their loss to Arizona State is going to hurt them a little bit, so they're not going to be in the top 5, but they were kind of trending there before. Georgia at number 7, I think they'll get a little bit of the brand there, being able to beat Ole Miss and stuff like that's going to help them out. Oregon, I have at number 5. I think Oregon wins out to finish the season. Notre Dame at number 4. I see them finishing out, winning the season. Alabama at 3. Indiana at 2. Ohio State at 1. Interesting conversation I had with Bud Elliott on Twitter today. He believes that they will actually hurt teams in the seeding if they lose the conference championship game this year. That was my thing, where he had Indiana at 4 and Ohio State at 1. But no, I apologize. He felt like that Indiana schedule is not going to be strong enough, and that the strength of record kind of stuff, the committee is going to favor Alabama and Texas A&M. He didn't say that was his opinion. He was just saying that's how he thinks the committee is going to play it out. So interesting stuff there. I do have some concerns about that with the ranked wins and stuff like that, because Peter Burns, a lot of people do like his stuff, but we'll see how that plays out. So maybe I should adjust Indiana, but for now I have Indiana, Ohio State at 1 and 2. Jeff, any thoughts on this before we get to yours?
Yeah, I would say, on the whole conference championship game, to me, it's how did you look and how close of a game was it? Like, if it was clearly you got to hand it to you, you should be kind of punished for it and drop down. But if you were right there, then maybe a slight punishment, but nothing big. That's just the way I look at all
the hard part is that if you do start punishing them, teams aren't going to want to play that game, right? Yeah, they're going to say, we're already ranked in, so let's just not play that game. But if you don't punish them, then you have people that are like, okay, why did we even watch the game, right?
Yeah. So how you lose matters.
Right. So and that's the premise of why they want to grow the playoffs to like 24, 28 teams now, is because they want to have games that weekend of the conference championship games, but they also recognize that those games don't mean anything. I think a lot of people kind of overlook that when they look at the 24, 28 team playoff and just say, oh, adding more teams, we hate that. Which, don't get me wrong, I'm not necessarily in favor of adding more teams either, but I do think it's important to recognize that's what they're thinking there, is we can play games that weekend instead of having the conference championship games.
So let me ask you, having Notre Dame at 4, to me that clearly says Notre Dame obviously will not lose a game the rest of the year. I guess that's a given. If they lost the third, that would knock them out. But for them to be 4, you're probably implying those other teams are either going to mostly have 2 losses as well, or some might have even a third, right? Like you're saying there's not going to be 4 teams with 1 loss, probably. Is that right? Because if there are 4 teams with 1 loss, then Notre Dame probably wouldn't be 4th.
Yeah, so I think Notre Dame's going to get some credit for wins here to end out the season. Pitt is a 2-loss team that if they win there at Pitt, I think they could get a little bit of credit there. Navy is currently undefeated. I think they could get some credit for beating Navy. And then, Stanford and Syracuse to end the season, I don't think they get very much credit there. But I just think there's too much parity right now in college football to guarantee that all of these teams are going to only lose one more game or anything like that. Like, I think you could see a 9-3 team get in over an Ole Miss or over a Georgia Tech. I don't think it's likely, but we also need to see what the rankings for the College Football Playoff Committee looks like when they come out with their first rankings before we can kind of, know for sure. But I think Notre Dame's going to get credit for beating USC, playing Texas A&M and Miami, and the committee in the past has not taken into account who did you beat. You be over them. They did in the 14 playoff, but they didn't last year. So I'm kind of going off that same idea that if Notre Dame just keeps winning, they're going to get up there higher in the standings.
Gotcha. Yep.
So, all right, Jeff, last thing, and then we'll get out of here. Here is your college football playoff prediction.
Yeah, and just so as far as the 12 teams, JR, the only difference in the teams is you had Ole Miss in, I have Missouri in. And I looked at their schedule, and it's not as difficult as some other teams. So that's why I have Missouri 10. So everyone know I have Ohio State 1, Indiana 2, and that would imply Indiana loses to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game and plays a close game. Otherwise, Indiana won't be 2, probably. I guess it does depend on whether the other teams, if they have 2 losses and Indiana 1 loss, then okay, I take that back. If the 3 and 4 teams have 2 losses and Indiana got beat fairly soundly and had 1 loss, they still have a chance to be number 2. But then I have Alabama number 3, so that implies they win the SEC. Not that that's a requirement to be 3 because they're not having conference champs have to be at the top 4. And then Texas A&M, really. So Texas A&M is likely to be in the SEC championship game against Alabama. So basically, you have 2 Big Ten teams and 2 SEC teams getting the byes. Then from there, I have Miami at 5th. So that means I think Miami is going to win the ACC in essence. I do think that. Number 6 is Oregon. So they're right up there. Think about that. 3 Big Ten teams in the top 6. And that really supports how we're saying, the Big Ten, the best teams. We have the best teams in America. Our top teams are better than the top teams for other conferences. 7 would be Texas Tech. So I'm pretty high in them. That would be the Big 12 winner. They are my sole representative for the Big 12. So, hey, Big 12, you might want to think about taking that deal of getting 2 teams in, guaranteed. And then number 8 is Georgia. So I think some losses are coming Georgia's way, but not like a bunch, enough to stay in. Notre Dame would be number 9. And there, that would imply some of these teams are going to have 2 losses and maybe even a 1 loss hanging in there potentially. I don't know, but so it's not going to be like a bunch of 3-loss teams. Otherwise, Notre Dame would be higher than that. 10, I have Missouri, like we talked about earlier. So that's 4 SEC teams in, unfortunately. But I do think, they're going to like to see at the end of the day, at the end of the year, they're going to have a lot of good wins ultimately to make this list. And then finally, 11, I have Georgia Tech. So just like you had, I think we had them in relatively similar spots there. And then South Florida at number 12. So really not a ton of differences with yours there. Just from a matchup perspective, I find it interesting. You would get a Notre Dame versus Georgia rematch. And then the winner would play Ohio State. Zing, zing. Those are rating bonanzas there. Versus Indiana would get real lucky here. As a 2 seed, they would play the winner, Missouri and Texas Tech. Now, I consider that a win for Indiana, right? Like a real good chance to beat those 2 teams. But a lot has to happen here for that to shake out. But I'm pretty aligned with you on this one, JR. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with you on this. I can definitely see Missouri as well. I like Eli Drinkowitz there. I just don't think they've played anybody from my top 25, but seeing the way the committee kind of treats them, or the AP poll kind of treats them, I could see the committee treating them a similar way as well. Notre Dame is interesting. Are they going to get credit for those wins? Are they not? I think, mine shows that they would get credit. Yours shows that maybe they don't get as much credit, because I think in order for them to be number 9 seed in the playoffs, they probably have to win out as well. So just really makes it all that more interesting for when we get the very first college football playoff rankings in November. I think that's going to be, what is that, November 3rd or something like that. So it's going to be really interesting when we get that. That'll really help us understand kind of the playoff prediction stuff. And it'll become less about predicting what's going to happen based on other people's opinions and more on what do we think is going to happen as the season plays out for some of this team. So
I think
very interesting stuff.
Probably just to say the disappointing thing is 3 Big Ten teams when we really like 4. I'm looking at the other teams. I just don't see the 4th. It's possible,
Yeah.
but I just
I wanted to put a 4th Big Ten team in there, but I said I was just like, I don't think any of them are getting enough respect at this point. Even if Illinois wins out, I think they're a fringe, 11-10 team because they're not getting very much respect. If Michigan wins out, I think that they do make it in, but you would see Ohio State take a drop if that happens, because they would have to beat Ohio State in order for that to happen. So, it's interesting how it all kind of plays out and trying to figure it out. And then the other team is also USC, which if USC wins out, they would be much higher in there because they would have to beat Oregon to get up there, and that would be a really good win for them, as it would be for Michigan.
That would be the path. Actually, it would. I still think Oregon. Who would they have beaten then? The problem with Oregon then is that Penn State damn game. I mean, the Penn State thing is really screwing things up, JR, because people are talking about Indiana, Ohio State. If Penn State were still really good, they'd be saying, ooh, and we still get to see Indiana and Ohio State get really challenged against Penn State, and now we're not. So that's really hurt the conference. Penn State's fallen off.
Right. Illini Bubba says don't count out Iowa. And you are exactly right, Illini Bubba. I mean, Iowa's on Oregon's schedule there as well, and that is at Kinnick. That's most likely going to be a night game. They do play USC as well, so they're going to have Minnesota this weekend, and then Oregon at USC, Michigan State at Nebraska. If Iowa wins out, they'll make it too.
All those teams that have a chance maybe to only have 2, they're all playing each other, though, in the Big Ten. So they're going to be knocking, causing that 3rd loss.
Well, let's look at the college football playoff odds for the Big Ten really fast, and then we'll get out of here. Of course, Ohio State and Indiana. Ohio State doesn't even have odds anymore. You literally cannot bet on Ohio State to make the playoffs or not anymore. It's kind of funny. Illinois is sitting at plus 1,800 to make it. Indiana is sitting at minus 3,000. Iowa's at plus 1,800 as well. Michigan plus 920. Oregon plus or minus 430. Sorry, not plus. USC is plus 920, and then Washington is plus 1,800. So the best odds you have there to make it are both USC and Michigan tied at plus 920. The next best is Washington, Iowa, and Illinois, all at plus 1,800. I say best ones there. Oregon and Indiana are obviously the highest. I'm saying are the plus, the best ones you have there. So, yeah, we'll see. One of these big teams is going to have to fall down, and the team that beats them is also going to have to win out. So, if you think Iowa can do it, go put your money on Iowa, I suppose. They're on FanDuel. That's where we get our odds from.
Based on how the year has gone, expect a lot of chaos, which is fun. This is what people have wanted, right? They wanted more parity. Although I'm still not going to fall off saying that a blue blood's going to win the damn title, though. Because I did stats in a whole podcast on the last 20 national championships and how there's a certain level of recruiting required. And yes, I understand transfer portal, but the reality is the majority of rosters are still, of the better teams, are still recruited, right? The ones with all this transition in rosters are ones that aren't good teams. Mm-hmm. Or if you try Florida State, but look what you got from that, right? They didn't recruit good enough, and they caught lightning in a bottle, had that awesome year with a bunch of transfers, but that's no way. Recruiting still matters, folks. Believe me, very important. Don't forget that.
And I would say evaluations is what matters the most in recruiting right now. You can't just go out and try to stack up all the 5 stars because A, everybody's trying to stack up on the 5 stars, and B, you're not going to keep those guys on your team as easily, as you were able to before because of the spending and everything else. Nowadays, you have to go out, you have to get the big name players, you have to get, a 5-star or 2, maybe even 3 in your class, and then you have to do great evaluations on like the 3 stars and the 4 stars out there and say these are guys that are underrated and they're actually better than what their stars are. And that's why I think a team like Indiana could eventually win the national championship, even if they only have like 10, 7, 10 4-star guys, because there are 3 stars out there that perform really, really well. Maybe they're not first-round draft picks, but they can perform really, really well in college. You just have to be phenomenal at evaluations to make that happen.
So that's why this is a fun year to see. If Indiana were to win it, that would break all the rules of recruiting classes and everything, man. I'm telling you, it'd be like, whoa. So,
yeah. Kurt says, what about BYU? Let me look at BYU's schedule really fast. I kind of look at BYU as kind of being what they were last year, 10-2. Probably not going to get enough credit with their wins. But if they do win out, or at least go 11-1, it's definitely possible because they have at Iowa State, at Texas Tech, TCU, at Cincinnati, and UCF there to end the year. There's a couple tough games there to end the year, and I don't know if BYU as a Big 12 team would get enough respect to lose to both Texas Tech and Cincinnati and be able to make it in. Maybe they lose to one of those and they still make it in, but I don't know.
I mean, that's as tough at Iowa State. I know Iowa State's not awesome, but they're still at Iowa State, Texas Tech, TCU, Cincinnati. That's a 4-game gauntlet. If they go through that and only lose 1 game, they could make it in there. I mean, I had them ranked 13th, so it's not like
you almost needed Texas Tech to stay as like a top 5 type of team, so that way even if you lost to them, it's on the road type of stuff.
To squeeze in a second Big 12 team. Yeah.
So we'll end with Dave's comment here because I did enjoy it. I thought it was a funny one, and then we'll get out of here. Dave said Iowa is going to be out at the end of the week, and I'm going to be eating bacon. Playing for the pig there. Love that, Dave. Should be a great game. CBS. You can see Iowa, Minnesota. Go ahead and give us a like, subscribe. Check Jeff out on Thursday, or premieres on Thursday night at 9 p.m. and then you can also catch it Friday morning. Catch Around the Big Ten premiering on Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Have a lot of good content coming up for you guys. Week 9 preview Tuesday night at 9 p.m. We put a lot of content out there for you guys, and you guys are watching it, and we appreciate you doing that. Tell a friend, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Jeff, anything you want to get to before we get out of here?
No, thanks for letting me join today. Subbing for Zach. I should have probably. What are we doing here? What are we doing? The Big Ten, the NCAA sucks. How's that? Is that kind of like I'm supposed to do?
There you go. You're doing your best Zach impression there. Great job. So, all right. Hey, thanks everybody. Thanks to Illini Bubba for the awesome show there. Appreciate it, and thanks everybody for listening and watching. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.